Greetings, Mavericks and new viewers. Tonight, direct and live from the Maverick News Network World Studios. This is Maverick News with Rick Walker.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Maverick News channel. I'm Rick Walker. Great to have everybody here. Big night, exclusive interview coming up with Grand Chief Wabiska Muskwa, who is with the ASMIN Nation. He's going to be talking with us about a serious international issue that involves the sale of Indigenous rights. Is it fraudulent? Is it cultural appropriation? Is it even real? We'll get into the details with him. Huge issue. It affects the future of our nation. It affects our culture. It affects the sovereignty of First Nations within Canada. It's an issue that will shape the future. Also tonight, before we get into our extended exclusive feature interview with Chief Wabiska, who is also known as Zane Bell, we'll give you today's top news stories. Julian Assange goes free. Tommy Robinson arrested in Canada. By-election. Topsy-turvy. Over she goes. The Trudeau Liberals in a bit of a panic tonight as the Conservatives take power in at least one riding in this by-election in the Toronto area. We'll get you the reaction to that. And what else do we have for you? Oh, yeah, the Oilers. Well, we all know what happened. I'm not even going to say it. I'll say it on the other side when we come back because it's just so sad.
You know, someone very profoundly once said many years ago that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on Earth.
The entire world is watching.
Every dictator, every crazy dictator in the world is watching.
The world is watching. On TV, the entire world is watching. On social media.
But the entire world is watching, and yes, they are seeing what we have apparently bravely been willing to say that others are thinking.
Stand for freedom. Literally stand for freedom. Let's get this done. The entire world is watching.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars.
Maverick News. Maverick News. Maverick News.
Let me have more control of my own destiny.
The world is watching. Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals. Defenders of individual rights and freedoms. Credible. Trusted. Grounded in reality. Maverick News. Maverick News. Defending free speech. Free speech. Donate. at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Julian Assange. He's a free man, sort of. He has now arrived in the Northern Mariana Islands, a U.S. territory, where he will attend court as part of a plea deal. So he will formalize this plea deal and leave, at that point, a free man. This caps off a 14-year legal battle where he has been pursued by U.S. prosecutors for leaking a lot of U.S. secret information, military information, hailed by some as a hero, a defender of free speech and journalism, viewed as others as a traitor. It depends on your point of view. Last week, he signed this deal with the United States, and it will see him plead guilty to one espionage charge instead of the 18 that he was originally facing. Now, of course, he'd already been in prison for a lengthy period of time in the United Kingdom. The United States has been trying to extradite him. Just didn't happen. So, as a result, he will get credit for time served. He will plead guilty, and then he will be released after basically having served the time for his penalty already in prison in the UK. So he's not going to face any additional prison time. So he left the UK and then got in this plane, and that's where he's at now. Let me show you. I'll rewind this. This was Assange on the plane en route. Sorry, I already had that queued up, but here we go.
Yeah, it's just like having 100 dollars to go sit away after the normal one.
So what's the long-term implication of this? I think it sort of depends on what he does from this point on. People are wondering, will he go back to WikiLeaks and capturing and then releasing sensitive top secret kinds of information, or will he lay low and stay out of trouble? Only time will tell. So one guy released, another guy arrested. Tommy Robinson, arrested in Canada. He's in Canada. He came here for a Rebel News event, a series of events, public speaking events. A lot of tickets sold. But yesterday, arrested at one of these events on suspicion of an immigration offense. Here's what the arrest looked like as he was taken into custody.
You've got an outstanding immigration warrant. We'll talk about it in the vehicle. Okay?
That's one outstanding warrant?
Yep, outstanding immigration warrant. We'll talk about it in the vehicle, okay?
How's your luck, eh? You've got 190. What about my stuff? What about my stuff? My passport stuff. Absolutely insane.
So he was finally released overnight, but today he had to surrender his passport. He's going to be here a while, folks. There will be a legal battle. Apparently, he's being told he has to report in, I think it's 3 times a week while this is all worked out. And it isn't clear yet if he will be able to attend and speak at the remaining events. There have been conditions overlaid on his release. So he's out and about, but not entirely free because he has restrictions on what he can and can't do while he is in Canada. And as I say, it looks like he's going to be here for a while. Now, a big upset in Canada overnight as the Conservatives have captured a Liberal stronghold in a by-election in the riding of Toronto St. Paul's. This isn't entirely a surprise because the polls had shown leading up to this that the Liberals were in trouble. We did report on this, and we told you that it was a very close race and that it might actually flip to the Conservatives after, I believe, having been held by the Liberals for some 30 years. This is, as I say, a Liberal stronghold. And this by-election was seen by some as what you would refer to as possibly a bellwether by-election. In other words, a predictor of what we are likely to see when voters go to the polls in the next federal election. This, of course, was a by-election because the sitting member of Parliament, Liberal, stepped aside. And so we got a new candidate in there. And it just didn't work out for the Trudeau Liberals in this riding. So voter turnout last night, pretty good actually for Canada. 43.5% of the eligible voters came out to cast their ballots. That's pretty high percentage, especially in a summer by-election. And then the question is, what does this mean for Trudeau heading into this next election? Should he even stay on as the leader? Opinions vary on this. But today, Trudeau at a news conference for something completely unrelated. He was at a news conference talking about British Columbia marine protection, but then at the end of his opening statement, he did address the by-election. I'll share his comments with you here now. And then we're going to get thoughts from his right-hand person, Chrystia Freeland, the Deputy Prime Minister. Here's Trudeau.
And before I wrap up, I would like to say a few words about last night's by-election. First, I want to thank all the volunteers and candidates for putting their name forward and participating in this important democratic exercise, including our tremendous Liberal candidate, Leslie Church, who ran a strong and positive campaign. I also want to congratulate Don Stewart on his victory in this tightly fought race. But most of all, I want to thank the people of Toronto St. Paul's for exercising your right to vote and making your voice heard. Now, this was obviously not the result we wanted, but I want to be clear that I hear people's concerns and frustrations. These are not easy times, and it's clear that I and my entire Liberal team have much more work to do to deliver tangible, real progress that Canadians across the country can see and feel. We'll never stop working and fighting to make sure that people have what they need to get through these tough times. My focus is on your success, and that's where it's going to stay. Avant conclu.
Translation? Oh boy, he's in trouble. I've told you for months, I said be patient. For those of you who want him gone, the clock is ticking. His time is just about up. The polls are indicative of that. You can see what's happening. He's very unpopular. He's a wounded bird, a wounded little duck. He's got a big problem. People don't like him anymore. Way past his best before date, at least for now. Nevertheless, his deputy prime minister, his heir apparent, many believe, is standing by him. Chrystia Freeland says that Trudeau can and should remain on as leader of the Liberals to run in the next election and to, it's her hope that he would continue to be prime minister. Here's her reaction today.
Maintenant, la première question.
Good afternoon, Marika Walsh with the Globe and Mail. Deputy Prime Minister, can the Prime Minister still stay on to lead the Liberal Party into the next election, given that you just lost one of the safest seats in the entire country last night?
Yes, he certainly can.
Can you explain why? Because everybody we're hearing from behind the scenes believes that the result last night means catastrophic losses across the country. If you cannot win in Toronto under Justin Trudeau, why should anybody believe you can win anywhere else under him?
Our government is focused on working hard for Canada and Canadians and on delivering results for Canada and Canadians. That is what the Prime Minister is focused on. That is what we are all focused on. The Prime Minister is committed to leading us into the next election, and he has our support.
Next question.
Hi, Minister. Barbara with iPolitics. Still about last night's results in Toronto, St. Paul's. Do you think the Liberals need a radical change in strategy and that perhaps a new leader in the party might be a necessary change?
I just answered that question. Let me say the Prime Minister is focused on delivering for Canada and Canadians. Our whole government is focused on delivering for Canada and Canadians. That's what we're going to continue to do. The result in St. Paul's is certainly disappointing. We knew it was going to be a hard fight. I think it's especially disappointing because so many of us know Leslie. We know how hard she and her team worked. And I do also want to congratulate Don Stewart. He and his team worked hard as well. We know that these are hard times for Canadians. We know that we have to work hard to earn back their trust. And we know that the way to do that is by delivering for them, by delivering fairness for every generation, by delivering investments in housing and infrastructure, including in rural broadband, the investment we're announcing today, by delivering investments in making life more affordable for Canadians with things like dental care, which is being rolled out this month to kids under 18, by delivering on a national program of early learning and childcare. Already, families in Ontario are saving more than $8,000 per child, but we need to get to $10 a day and be sure there are enough spaces for all the families that want a space. We need to keep on delivering investments in our economy and in economic growth. I was at a car parts plant yesterday, and I could see the brilliant work the people working there are doing, the workers, the innovators. They need our support so that Canada can be on the cutting edge of the 21st century global economy. And we know that we need to deliver all of those investments in a fiscally responsible way so that inflation can continue to stabilize. It's now been within the Bank of Canada's target range for 5 months in a row. That's good news. We have more work to do so that the Bank of Canada can continue its work bringing rates down.
And why exactly do you think the liberals are failing to retain voters in ridings like St. Paul's that, the party held for decades? What is going on?
I think I already answered that question, and I'll just say this is a disappointing result. We take it seriously. We know that things are hard for people in Canada, and we know we have to work even harder, delivering for Canadians, winning back the trust of Canadians. That's what we're all committed to do.
Next question.
Bonjour, Madame Freeland. Christian Noël de Radio-Canada. Dans la circonscription...
They're still going on, still going on. She's not going to get off the hook that easy. Hang on. This is too good. We're going to stay on it. Hang on. She'll go back to English in just a moment. When she's out of things to say, she says, we take this seriously. She always says that. While she tries to think of something to say. This is incredible. Translation. It's just incredibly embarrassing, and I have no idea what we're doing.
Facteur qui est très important pour la vie des Canadiens et Canadiennes.
Ceci conclut la conférence de presse. Merci tout le monde.
There are many people still here.
Minister Freeland. Mark Ramsey with the Toronto Star. Yesterday before the by-election...
Well, I'll take one more.
Yesterday before the by-election, you said the Conservative choice was cold, rural, and small. Then Canadians in a riding that has been dominated by your party for years disagreed with you and made that choice. If you don't have your finger on the pulse with voters in Toronto, St. Paul's, which voters do you have an understanding of?
Thank you for the question. And, this is a disappointing result for us. And we take the result really seriously. We know that Canadians are hurting right now. And we know that we have to work hard to win back their trust. We have to work hard to deliver for Canada and Canadians, to deliver with things like building more homes faster, to deliver with programs that make life more affordable for Canadians, like dental care, like early learning and childcare, to deliver with investments to grow the economy and to create great jobs. And we know that we need to do it in a fiscally responsible way, because it is so important to continue on the path we're on. For 5 months now, inflation has been within the Bank of Canada's target range. That is good news, but we have more work to do so that we can support the Bank of Canada in lowering rates, because we know that that will bring relief to Canada and Canadians. Thank you very much.
Did you make a mistake by making those comments? Did you make a mistake by making those comments?
And that's it. It was the other thing that made this unusual last night is apparently there were 84 candidates listed on the ballot. 84. 192 polls, a total of 36,962 voters out of an eligible 84,934 turned out to vote. In the riding, you have about 116,000 people who live there in total. And almost all the votes went to the very top two parties, the Conservatives, Don Stewart winning with 15,555 votes. Liberal Leslie Church, close, but no cigar, with only 14,965. A distant third, Green Party candidate Christian Cullis with just over 1,000 votes, 1,059. And then everybody else really pulls up the rear. People's Party, only 234 votes. And then you have a bunch of independents behind that. Kind of in the same ballpark. Some of them, very, very few votes. Some with like 9, 8 votes, 7. And then, a few with like 0. Some got like 2, 3. So that would be like a husband voting for his wife, or a wife voting for their husband, or a mom voting for her candidate's son. I expect something like that. So pretty embarrassing showing by some of those other candidates who basically polled in with the vote at like 0. That's not good. 84 names on the ballot. And as a result of that, the results were delayed in coming in. Elections Canada, I guess, had one big challenge on their hands dealing with that huge volume of votes. Why did this happen? Is it not self-explanatory? People are fed up with the economic situation, with the assault on freedom, essentially. Big issues, man. Very emotional for people. Housing crisis, mass immigration, all of these issues, and even the electrification of the auto industry, which is another big issue, right? A lot of people don't want it, but they're pushing ahead with it anyway. And then you have all these social issues that are dividing people. So the entire situation is such that we have a very unstable country in a time of war. And then you have, on top of that, concerns about members of parliament who are potentially compromised, acting in traitorous ways, possibly. So all of these things are cause for concern. And that's why Justin Trudeau and his Liberal candidate in that riding of Toronto St. Paul's lost last night. And the Conservatives surged ahead. If they can win there, if the Conservatives can win in that riding, then it's pretty clear that if this had been a national election, you probably would have seen a landslide Conservative victory with a majority Conservative government on the other side. One of Canada's most popular vehicles, the Ford F-150 pickup, is going through a recall. Certain F-150 pickup trucks are being recalled in Canada and the United States because the transmission can suddenly, without warning, downshift into first gear while the vehicles are being driven. And this can happen at any speed. The F-Series is the top-selling vehicle in Canada, in North America, sells more than any Ford cars. It is one of the top vehicles for, it is the top vehicle for Ford, period. And so this recall south of the border in the United States impacts more than 550,000 F-150s from the 2014 model year and up. So the repairs will be available in this in dealerships this coming fall. And before this happens, before the vehicle downshifts into first gear, a malfunction indicator light might illuminate, according to Ford. And in some cases, the output shaft signal could recover while driving and the vehicle will resume normal function. In other cases, according to the automaker, the vehicle may need to be stopped and restarted to regain normal transmission operation. So as a result of this, it is possible that Ford F-150 drivers could lose control of their vehicles if this happens. And so this will involve an updating of the powertrain control software, and that repair, that update, will be performed at no cost to owners. So what else do we have? This is interesting. NBC reporting tonight that new video and documents are reviving questions about Saudi Arabia's role in the 9/11 terrorist attacks. Here, I'll show you. But they have. So this involves a video that was filmed by a Saudi national. This person has been under investigation for years now because of his association with two of the hijackers who crashed the plane into the Pentagon. So this new video released, I don't have a copy of it here because I don't have access to one of them. But the video, along with other documents, it says, are reviving questions about whether this Saudi national, who FBI officials believe worked for Saudi Arabia's intelligence service, played a role in the 9/11 attacks. The name of this Saudi national, Omar al-Bayoumi. He's been under the watchful eye of the FBI San Diego field office all these years because of his association with two of the hijackers, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, prior to the attack. So this video was unsealed in federal court last week. It's a self-narrated video showing al-Bayoumi giving a tour of landmarks in Washington, D.C. The video was shot over several days back in 1999. It includes footage of entrances, exits, security checkpoints in the U.S. Capitol. Federal officials say they believe that the hijackers were planned to crash one of the planes, United 93, into the U.S. Capitol before passengers stormed the cockpit, and then it was forced to crash in rural Pennsylvania. You may recall that it wasn't just the Twin Towers that were targeted and taken down. So this video has been aired by CBS previously. And the existence of this video apparently has been known for quite some time, but has never been released before. Let me see if I can find you a copy of it. I believe it was first shown on 60 Minutes. See if I can show this to you. I don't know if it's copyrighted. Here we go. Yes, okay. Let me show you a little bit of this. Here we go. Boy, by today's standards, this really looks dated, doesn't it? The video footage, just a little bit grainy. Times have changed. So yes, this is 60 Minutes footage. He's there at the Capitol building. Those are the two that he was associating with. That aroused suspicion. But I'll tell you, after 9/11, everything changed. The world changed, and even the way I had to practice journalism after that changed, because everywhere you went, everywhere I went afterward, if you were seen with a video camera any place, you were often approached, sometimes even by police. I was down in, Tennessee, working on a special project shortly after 9/11. I was doing a story. I was working on a documentary about fog-related highway crashes. There'd been a bad one in the past in Tennessee, and I was down there talking to people with the Tennessee Department of Transportation, TDOT, and I was just on the side of a road shooting generic kind of footage of traffic going by in the area where the big crash had happened previously, not on that day, but just shooting traffic randomly. And police officer pulled up asked me a whole bunch of questions, who I was, what I was doing. I'm just a Canadian boy down here doing my thing. Anyway, very friendly, no issues. I was working with the authorities there and had gone around to see some people with TDOT, explained to them. Anyway, no big deal, but much more careful and quick to pull over and ask questions about things like that. Just standing there with a camera. That's all it took. But a sign of the changing times, and things really have not gotten back to normal since then. So, should we call John before we get into our feature interview? Yes, we will. Let's call John right now and talk about what happened with the Oilers last night. We did that big build-up pre-game interview.
Rick, how you doing?
Oh, I'm okay. You're live on the air, sir. And John, I'm so sad. What happened? What happened to the Oilers?
I'm not sad, Maverick News family around the world. It's absolutely incredible. Anybody that comes from the number 2 team and makes it into the playoffs is an absolute winner. Winner, winner, winner.
But they didn't get the chicken dinner.
I gotta give our congratulations to the Florida Panthers. What an incredible team, and a shout out to the Oilers. I could cry, but we came from number 2 to make it to the playoffs.
Yes.
It's absolutely incredible. In the history of the Stanley Cup, it's never happened before in 35 years.
Only one, just one goal difference, right? I mean, it was so close, the series.
It was so good. It wasn't just close. It was awesome, awesome, awesome.
Yeah.
Don Cherry, we love you. Ron McLean's from Red Deer, Rick. Did you know that? I didn't know that.
You're living in the past, man.
He's a Red Deer guy, eh?
Yeah.
What an incredible series, Rick. It's been a nail biter right down to the very end of it, and nothing but cheers for the Oilers. You know.
Yeah. Well, it was a great series. It was a heck of a ride. It was an emotional roller coaster yesterday. We were on a real high around here, being up in Canada land, rooting for the Oilers as they made their way down to Florida for that final game, Game 7. It was for all the marbles, and the Panthers did it.
Rick, it's just so good. It's just so good to make it into the playoffs. Any team that makes it into the Stanley Cup playoffs is a winner. They're already a winner. And to come from number two in the league, I tell you, we are so proud. I could just cry tears of joy. So proud for our Oilers. Go, Oilers, go. They did us proud. They did Alberta proud. They did Canada proud. Proud.
Okay.
Well,
all right.
But you know, cheers to the Florida Panthers. I mean, what an awesome team. You can't take that away from them. To come back down 3 games, the baby Jesus and the good Lord and the gods were praying for the Oilers to come back and to make it such an incredible series. A nail biter right on the end. You know, it could have gone either way last night. It really could have gone either way. We always knew that, Rick. We knew it.
Well, there you go. Well, John, thank you for your coverage. Thank you for your emotional investment in this. And I know that you came very close to, and this was another Maverick News first, came very close to peeing your pants with excitement.
Panties, Rick, not pants. Panties. And I gotta give a shout out to you, Rick. Thank you so much for putting those awesome Edmonton Oiler photos up. And my friend Ralph is blind. And thank you on behalf of handicapped people all over Canada. And I'm blind. Thank you so much. And those are just awesome pictures, Rick. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, it's It was my pleasure, John. And
you saw number 99 Gretzky and 11 Messier and Connor McDavid, number 11 Hyman. What an incredible series! Just incredible.
Well, the dream is not dead; it's just delayed. There's always next season, so the Oilers can come back.
Rick, it's like farming. There's always next year.
That's right. That's right.
There's always next year. But thank you so much to the Maverick News family around the world. I know they think I'm a bit of a nut job in the chat. That's okay. If you were in Edmonton, you would feel the passion. We're still drunk. We've been drunk for a week here, We're drunk on adrenaline,
Yeah.
And go Oilers, go. They did Canada. So proud.
And John, we're all a little bit of a nut bar around here. That's what makes us the Maverick family. We are the Island of Misfit Toys.
Rick, we're not nut bars. We're just in the Misfit Toys section at Walmart.
Right. There you go. Yeah, that's right.
And Rick, we're not even on the discount rack either. We're full price. But okay. I love you, my friend. I love the Maverick News family around the world. And you know what? A shout out. I'm part American. A shout out to our American friends around the world. God bless you. Good for you. And congratulations to the Florida Panthers. I mean, they worked so hard for that Stanley Cup. They really did. And may God bless them. We got to be honorable, Rich. We got to be honorable and sportsmen about this.
And the Edmonton fans, yes. Yeah, and the Edmonton fans are being commended for being so sportsmanlike and gracious in defeat. But next year is another season. And John, we got to go. So we're signing off, but thank you.
Love you from around the world, from Alberta. And remember, the Calgary International Stampede is coming up in July. The largest outdoor rodeo in the world, over $1 million. In prize money. Rick, don't hate me. I got to promote Alberta.
Okay, we got to go. Thank you, John.
Love you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
There you go. Another Maverick News first. All right, let's move on to our feature interview for tonight. Let me gather my thoughts. This is actually a huge story. We've touched on it a couple of times over the past couple of years. But tonight we have an exclusive interview with Grand Chief Wabiska Moskwa of the ASMIN Nation. What is the ASMIN Nation? Some say it doesn't even exist. And if you were to inquire about the ASMIN Nation in, say, ChatGPT, it would come back and tell you that there's no such thing. The Grand Chief, who also goes by the name of Zane Bell, would argue otherwise. And you can find websites with the name ASMIN Nation. Now, Zane Bell has been, Chief Zane Bell, has been working to, in his words, restore his community. Restore the ASMIN Nation, which he would assert goes back hundreds of years. Well, back to the 1600s even. But here's the core of this issue. This is why it's such an important story. The truth of the matter is there are people out there selling Indigenous rights using the ASMIN name. Now, what I'm about to share with you is not meant to conclusively say one way or another if anyone is doing anything illegal. But is this a fraudulent act? I would say yes, fraudulent in a legal sense, maybe not, but maybe. It depends on who is doing it and under what context. You see, the federal government does not recognize these groups doing this. And so while they're selling what amounts to citizenship within their communities, within their ASMIN community, in a way to help these people become adopted into an indigenous community to protect property rights and to gain other rights as an indigenous person under Canadian and international law. The truth of the matter is these fees that they are paying may actually be buying them nothing, because without federal government recognition, they're really not availing themselves of any rights whatsoever. And in fact, that is exactly what Chief Zane Bell will tell you tonight. That being said, he has been involved, self-admittedly, with some of these people who are involved with these ASMIN entities online. It's kind of a complicated issue, but it all relates to the United Nations Declaration of Rights for Indigenous Peoples. It relates to the transformation of Canada as it is happening in real time, while First Nations peoples, Aboriginal peoples, and those who advocate for the decolonization of colonized countries continue to apply pressure in order to achieve their political goals, which ultimately in Canada involves land back to Indigenous people, to the Indians. And language is important here, as you will find out in this exclusive interview with Zane Bell. So complicated it is that he will tell you that he was actually duped himself. Now, what's been happening is that over the last number of years, these memberships or citizenship cards, they've been sold over this length of time to people who are clearly not Indigenous. But this connects to the existence of the Métis people, and an Indigenous population, Indigenous communities of mixed blood, mixed European and Indigenous blood here from North America. It creates this question, what is an Indigenous person? It blurs the lines. It has resulted in accusations of race shifting, cultural appropriation, racism, prejudice. The federal government in Canada does recognize some Métis communities as Indigenous. As a result, the people who have that recognition also have rights that are not afforded to others, non-Indigenous peoples. But what's happening out there is that people who are not Indigenous, people like myself, are being told that all you have to do is buy a membership, pay your $50 or your $200, pay your annual fees on top, and you will be adopted into an ASMIN community. With that adoption comes Indigenous rights. Why is that important? Well, if you're concerned that land is shifting back, the control of land is being shifted back to First Nations in Canada and in the United States and across what they refer to as Turtle Island, which is all of North America, the Caribbean, and some other areas in the Americas. Huge landmass. If you're concerned that the sovereignty of Canada or the United States is being lost and it's being handed back, control of the land is being handed back to Indigenous populations, and you believe that in the future you're going to own nothing and maybe be happy or not, then some people are looking for ways to protect themselves. Canada has embraced this kind of change. Canada has passed legislation nationally through the federal government to incorporate the United Nations Declaration of Rights for Indigenous Peoples into Canadian law. UNDRIP, as it's called, is not a binding document in and of itself internationally, but Canada has made it binding voluntarily under the Trudeau government. As a result, our legal system is being transformed. We actually have now a dual legal system, the regular legal system, plus another path for Indigenous peoples to take if they choose to use it as a result of UNDRIP and political forces, I would say, that recognize a disproportionate level of incarceration for Indigenous peoples. It's the way the federal government is addressing this. Bottom line is, a lot of people are afraid they're going to lose their property rights, maybe lose their land, lose their homes in the face of this change that is coming North America wide because of UNDRIP, and especially in Canada, where this United Nations document is actually, it truly is, integrated into Canadian law right now. All Canadian law now has to integrate with and be compliant with UNDRIP. It actually makes UNDRIP the overriding, most powerful piece of documentation. It's not even formal legislation, but this document overrides basically all Canadian law. All Canadian law must comply with it. And we're just at the beginning stages of what is coming. So a lot of these memberships have been sold, but the truth of the matter is, without the federal government recognizing ASMIN, these memberships are potentially worth zero. All that being said, on top of that, people who are buying these memberships or citizenship packages are trying to, in some cases, take advantage of other government programs to qualify for grants or job opportunities. And we will talk about that more in this upcoming interview. Is it fraud? You can decide. More importantly, the courts may need to decide, because we're told that formal complaints have been lodged now with the authorities in Canada and the United States, and that investigations may be taking place. And I need to follow up further with the authorities to get more information about this. But there is a deep divide that's happening now, because Chief Zane Bell, Wabiska Makwa, says that when he fell ill, other people who were overseeing these ASMIN entities took advantage of his illness, he says, and began to use his name without his authorization to continue to sell these packages for profit. I think you're beginning to get the picture. And the question is, who's actually liable? Is Chief Wabiska Makwa liable? Does he have any legal liability here? As a result of all this, the Grand Chief himself is clearly in a position where he will be scrutinized for his actions over the last number of years by the authorities, even though he is involved apparently in reporting some of this to investigators who are working through what some would describe as the colonial legal system. Complex issue. I think my prelude to it all maybe gives you a taste of what this is all about. I hope it's self-explanatory, but Chief Wabiska Makwa, or Zane Bell, his other name, will be able to explain this, I think, clearer for you when we come back on the other side. Stay with me. Exclusive interview coming up right after this.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
The information war is raging. Truth without integrity is worth nothing. Maverick News. Because those who have power and those who seek it must be held accountable.
The world is watching.
Join our family of truth seekers. Donate today and add your voice to the chorus of Maverick Knights. Donate at maverickdonations.com. Truth. Integrity. It's the Maverick way. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Chief Wabiska, Chief Miko, thank you so much for joining us on the program today. I'll start with you, Chief Miko. Just introduce yourself, and then we'll throw it over to Chief Zane Bell.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I am Miko Hawkins. Miko in my native tongue, which is Choctaw, means chief. So I'm Chief Hawkins. I'm located in the United States. I am also the Chief Governing Officer for International Indigenous Children and Family Services. Have met a lot of connections through that, and in doing so, I have met Chief Wabiska here, and I'll pass the mic to him to let him introduce himself to you all.
Yeah, welcome. Hi, everybody. Sorry, I was just about to cough. Yeah, I'm, Nina Wabiska Makwa, Danishna Kazan Dodem Makwa, Manitowaj Danjabar. It's a nice day. It's a good day. Always introduced in native language up here. I'm an environmental biologist, trained at and worked in 3 levels of government. My last position was with acting senior scientific advisor for Indian Affairs in the Ontario region. I worked for Environment Canada and the provincial ministry, and also a municipality way back when. I'm an elder, 72 years old, and I've been trying to reestablish, as my grandfather wanted me to do. He set me on his knee many years ago to reestablish the family nation, because the issues of Aboriginal rights back in the 60s was non-existent. It was still very much of a slave camp on Indian reserves. They didn't change the Indian Act until 61. A lot of issues of history of Aboriginal entitlements, and Métis were an issue at that time, because my grandfather's cousin was Louis Riel and Gabriel Demong of the Louis Riel rebellion in Manitoba, when the Canadian government decided to take over the plains after they were working on the purchase of the Rupert's land from Hudson Bay, and all that was a certificate to do fur trade. It had nothing to do with the land. So government bought stolen property, the Rupert's land, all stolen property, because the Hudson Bay didn't own it in the first place. So the history they don't teach, and that's basically where we're at that position now, is that they don't teach history, and people believe they have rights that they don't have. So that's a bit of an introduction, and I'll let you ask some questions there, Rick.
Sure. So I guess we should try to zero in on the main issue of the day, which for you is what some are characterizing as kind of a takeover of what is called the ASMIN nation. Can you first of all explain what ASMIN is?
ASMIN is a name. I had to change our community history and family lines to a new name, because we had 3 other corporate takeover attempts by stealing the name of our nation. So I re-registered the nation with Corporations Canada as a management corporation to give the copyright. But ASMIN means Anishinaabe. That's the people. That's who all the most of the Eastern Aboriginal communities are Anishinaabe people. Some call them Ojibwe and Potawatomi and Cherokee, Chippewa and other Mississaugas. And Solutrean is a name from a technology of flint knapping. I'm a flint knapper. Technology of flint knapping that was postulated by Dennis Sanford of the Smithsonian. I had a lot of talks with him about the population of Eastern Canada by the Solutrean people coming across the ice sheet from Spain to Newfoundland. And I had a lot of talks with him, and he's still doing that research on the Solutrean because of the Solutrean points on the Eastern Coast. So I added the Solutrean and then Métis because I'm Métis. I'm my ninth great grandmother was the Marie Madeleine Nicolette, who was the daughter of Jean Nicolet, one of the 13 interpreters from Champlain. And at that time, Champlain said there will be a new race of people, the blending of the French and the natives, and my whole family line and all the many family lines from beginning of New France from the 1600s were all interrelated. The joke is I'm my own cousin 250 ways and counting because of all the intermarriage. See, the French didn't bring women over at the beginning. They brought the fille de roi and fille de mer, brought some women off the slums of Paris to give the Frenchmen some wives to marry, because with all the diseases coming in from DeSoto and Florida, etc., the population of Native Americans was dropping fast because of the European diseases. So there wasn't that many women to marry the Frenchmen, though a lot did. But they're running out of women, so the French brought in women. In the United States, they shipped everybody over to the United States to populate. The Brits had a different way of populating their colony. In Canada, the beginning of the baby bonus was that the trappers and the fur trade, they'd go away for a year, come back. If they had a baby, they got their year's wages that they would have got for fur trade as a baby bonus. And that was the basis of the baby bonus. So because you come back all the way from out west to Montreal, and you could lose your canoe and all your furs. So that's how they populated Nouvelle-France. And they married the native women. And because in childbirth, there's always a concern about having a number of children. Most of my ancestors had many, many wives because the women died in childbirth. So the history, people don't know the history of Nouvelle-France, but I'm a Métis. I'm an Eastern Métis. The Western Métis is all my family that move out west, and some were already married with the native communities, and other ones married the Cree, the Plains Cree out there when they got there. So we're all interrelated. So that's what Métis are. They're a mixed race people, or the half-breeds. The word for us used to be called le bastard Canadien. It was the bastard Canadians because we're doing fur trade up here versus the American fur trade, and they called us the bastard Canadians. And then they eventually, well, there was all kinds of words. It was the burnt sticks and Jean de Terre. There was all kinds of names for Métis, but eventually it became just Métis. And so that's the history of Canada that most people don't know. They don't teach this in schools. They don't teach the development of Canada, or Kanata. The economic drivers of Canada were the Métis, and did all the fur trade. And so there's a long history there that they don't teach, and that's where the complications come. So when Pierre Elliott Trudeau wanted to bring the Constitution of Canada from Britain back in 1982, the First Nations people, the Harpers and other ones out west, said if you don't include the Métis, because a lot of their relatives were Métis, mixed blood, we won't sign the Constitution. So he included the Métis, and the definition was to be a Métis, you have to have an Aboriginal ancestor, self-professed to be Métis, and then be a member of a historic community. They had only 2 cases of Métis rights in Canada, where the Powley case, where a gentleman, Mr. Powley, shot a moose, tagged it, etc. He got arrested. He was on past to the Western Gate before he got to court, to the Supreme Court. And they said, yeah, his family was in and out of the First Nation there in the Sault Ste. Marie area. So he had the right to shoot the moose. So that was the only Métis rights issue up until 2004. Then we had the Daniels case. Well, the Daniels case was right after, it was the Grand Chief of the Congress of Aboriginal People in Ottawa. When the Supreme Court was signed, he said, okay, what does it mean to have these three Aboriginal people? You got Inuit, you got Indians as defined by bans under the Indian Act and Métis. What does that really mean? 34 years and tens of millions of dollars or whatever it cost was. We go to the Supreme Court and we get a decision in 2016. Yep, Métis are Aboriginal, but we're going to call them Indians now. But you don't have to be a member of historic Métis community. And that's the big issue right now, is that it opens up the definition of what a Métis is. And there's all these pretend Indians. Oh, I have an Aboriginal ancestor. Well, these people don't prove their genealogy. They just say they're Aboriginal and they're self-professing to be Aboriginal. I don't have to be a member of a historic Métis community before effective control. So I have all these Aboriginal rights, which is an error. And that's the big issue about these pretend Indians. They say, oh, I have an Aboriginal ancestor way back when, and I'm a Métis now. Well, you've never had any association with any Aboriginal community in your whole life or your parents' life. You don't know Aboriginal culture and traditions. You have no knowledge of these things. So how are you a Métis, right? And when Pierre Trudeau and René Lévesque, after the Constitution was signed, it says, if you haven't practiced your Aboriginal customs traditions and you don't know your history, you've already become part of the melting pot, like in the United States. You're assimilated. If you're assimilated, you're no longer an Aboriginal. The other thing, in World War I, you couldn't, as an Aboriginal, you couldn't join the military until you enfranchised, which means you're no longer an Aboriginal. You're a colonial. You're a citizen. You're a serf of the crown. And so
that's very interesting. Okay, so first of all, let me just backtrack a bit here, because if you look online, I guess this is a result of your actions, which is to register as a corporation.
Yep.
In order to protect what you're saying is like your copyright. And then there is actually your corporation number. So is that what you registered there?
That's right.
Okay. So you did that to protect your nation and the identity under the colonial system, if you will, right? Okay. Now, your assertion is that to define Métis, and it's not just your assertion, I guess it's through legal precedent set through the colonial system, is that it isn't really just about linkages genetically. It's about whether you're born here, and it is also about whether you're part of a First Nations community, either through birth or...
Not First Nation. It's not a legal term, First Nation.
Okay, so I stand corrected on that. Can you clarify this for me? Because I found a video of you online, because I've actually been looking at your stuff for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And here's just a very short clip, and then I'm going to get you to elaborate on this to further explain what you just said.
So this whole idea of racial purity, racial this, racial that, is all, I don't want to say inappropriate, it's just not real, right? People are who their community says they are. And if you are born into a community, adopted in a community, and they accept you, then you're part of that community.
So could you just elaborate on that a bit? Because this is what you were just starting to get into. And I think it's probably at the heart of the matter, really.
Yes. Under Aboriginal customs traditions, which most people don't know, adoptions have always been there. Because originally, when the French met with the, I'll say, Aboriginal natives, right? You don't trade with your enemy. So they made family making ceremony. And so when they made family making ceremony, they could do trade. And Jean Nicolet, who is the interpreter for Champlain, I think there was only 100 people, 150 Frenchmen in Nouveau France at that time. He went to the Nipissing, he went to the Algonquins, he was adopted into the Algonquin land, the Algonquin nation as a full-blooded war chief. And these are the adoption lines. But he also married Native and had Native descendancy, which I'm one of. Actually, I'm a descendancy on his 2 lines. And that's the adoption process. So when people come into a community, they're adopted in, and it's usually the spouse of someone from that community, and they adopt them in. If people come into that community and adopted, then their descendancy can be considered Aboriginal because the community adopted them. And the way in Aboriginal customs or traditions, if you come into a community and you don't have a clan or any family connection, the chiefs or the clan mothers adopt them as their own child until they get their own clan or family started, right? There's also an issue of whether you're going in a good way. If you're not going in a good way, you're kicked out. So you're really on your best behavior, and you do things wrong that affects the community, you're kicked out. It's one of the words in, I think in one of the other nations, it's called the walking away ceremony. You're told to leave. You may come back in a year or so if you survive the winter, and if you've done good, you get back in. So adoptions are there in any culture around the world because the clan mothers who have the history, like in the Iroquois Confederacy, when you come into your manhood ceremony, you got to relate all the names and speak in Haudenosaunee or whatever, Mohawk, Seneca, Tuscarora, or whatever. You have to relate all your grandmother's names back as many generations. One of my friends, his son had a name 32 ancestors. If you don't get that, you don't pass your manhood ceremony. So the culture is very important. In a Métis community, the culture is a little bit different. You've got your historical Aboriginal family, and then you have your Métis family relatives. So you don't discriminate against yourself that you're part French or Scottish or Irish, depending, or even Spanish. And in the East Coast, it was the Portuguese came in with the Mi'kmaq. So you embrace your cultures, both of them. I embrace all my Scottish, French, and Native cultures, and I got many Native lines, and many of my ancestors were adopted into Aboriginal communities and became important people in Aboriginal communities. So the community is who accepts you as a member of that community. And when you look in the Oxford Dictionary, the basis of all British law, a community is a group, and a group is more than 6. Whatever it is, whether it's a tiddlywink community, it's a community. So this is where the English language gets really bastardized and changed and manipulated for people's usage. But when it comes to Aboriginal rights, which is the whole issue about the pretend Indian and sovereign citizen, you have to have that connection historically to an Aboriginal community. It was before effective control as a Métis. But now they've taken that off. Now they're disputing that, and they'll probably change it back because of all these pretend Indians. Oh, I had an Aboriginal ancestor. But people don't prove their ancestry. You have to prove your ancestry to have that availability of those rights. Now, when you come down to the rights-based initiative, what are the rights of a Métis unrecognized? And I talked to you about that before. Recognized means it's a list in Indian Affairs of who they fund, whether it's the political lobbyist groups, which Supreme Court ruling says political lobbyist groups can have Aboriginal membership, but they're not Aboriginal. You can have people, and many of these are 100% Aboriginal membership, but the political lobbyist group has no Aboriginal rights. And so that's why some political lobbyist groups have non-Aboriginals in there as members, because they can't discriminate in Canadian law of joining a not-for-profit political lobbyist group or not-for-profit corporation, right? So this is, again, where you get confusion. Well, I'm a member of the this, that, right? And they're recognized, right? Well, you're not Aboriginal. You don't have those Aboriginal rights. And we even had non-Aboriginals in our community because they're supporting us in everything. And some of them are relatives and cousins. Why would I discriminate against a cousin who's got no Aboriginal line, who wants to work with me, come to the powwows and all that kind of stuff with me, right? So we don't, but they don't get Aboriginal rights, they get community rights. And you'll see some of the videos I've done. We don't know what those rights are right now because we're still February 11th, 2009. We put our comprehensive claim into the government of Canada because under Canadian law, you're supposed to sign treaty. And if you haven't signed treaty, those people who are taking our lands and resources have to go to the Crown and be charged with fraud and everything else. And that's where we are right now, is that you have people trying to take lands and resources, money, etc. And that's what's happening right now currently, is that we have these people who are non-Aboriginal. They have no Aboriginal rights under the laws of Canada, nor do they have any Aboriginal rights under Aboriginal customs and traditions, because they are not Aboriginal. They're not going in a good way. They're not following the grandfather teachings and other teachings that we have. And they're just taken over for the money. And where the clue
so when you're talking about the money, there are a couple of layers to this that I see, and maybe you can clarify. The first issue is they're selling memberships, essentially, or even citizenship. Is that correct, into the ASMIN community, but maybe not in a proper way? So is there some degree of fraud that may be taking place with some of these groups?
Oh, I won't be specific to any group. If you're selling a membership to get a membership into an organization, that can be considered major fraud, because it's false pretenses. You're taking money. It's especially on the internet, it's internet fraud. Mm-hmm. But where a lot of them get mixed up, if you're in my videos, I talk about self-supporting by our own contribution. We're not funded by the government. So how would you develop anything? How would you take the cases to the courts? You have to have contributions. It's a voluntary, and it always was before I come back from the surgery. It was always a contribution if you got it. If you haven't got it, you still got your membership. And all the membership is to give people pride that they're attached to a community, just like Costco and Canadian Tire and all these other places have membership cards, right? But when it comes to an Aboriginal community, the government said at one time it was illegal for us to have membership cards in our community, but the local Tiddlywinks club could have their membership cards, right? But people figured that these membership cards gave them Aboriginal rights, which is totally erroneous. It's a means by which you can get money to develop and pay for the expenses as you're developing a nation. And one of my videos I talk about, it's very expensive to go to the Supreme Court. The Daniels case of shooting a moose, it was over $10 million. Not the Daniels, sorry, the Powley case. The Daniels case, I have no idea what it cost. But just to shoot to have the legal rights to shoot a moose, $10 million, something wrong in the whole system, right? So the problem that we have here is the government has created a scenario where people can create frauds. I'm Aboriginal, I'm creating a nation and blah, blah, blah. And they haven't detailed what it is. While I was away in medical leave with the brain surgery and the COVID and other conditions I don't need to talk about, they revamped everything. But what they did up until about a month ago, when
when you say they, who are they?
There's about 9, maybe 10 main players in the ASMIN, ASMINTI now it is, but there's also an ASMIN of the boreal forest. They're all interconnected. They had these funding like Tumult and all kinds of way to get money from 3 different groups, right? They have okay, I'll get on to the other part. But sorry, there's just so much, Rick. It's just hard to.
It is. It's intricate.
It's extremely well orchestrated as far as I'm concerned, a con. But as of last year, when I was feeling better, and you can see from that last video, I look terrible. I don't look so good today, but anyhow, on that last video, I was looking really rough shape. But this is what I was dealing with, trying to figure out, but they weren't giving me the information. They're putting all kinds of things into the government in court cases, which I didn't even know about them, right? And they wouldn't give me the membership list. They wouldn't give me access. And they were even setting up an email as my Wabiska Muckwa at Ask It for Equity. Okay, so They've created a massive big organization to generate funds to go in, and it goes into, I don't know where it goes to. I'm not in any
So
bank.
is Ask It, but you've been involved with these people for a long time yourself, right? And
only since I come back, they were there working with my ex-wife. I divorced her in 96. And this lawyer was recommended to me, but I had a couple of meetings with him before I went down to Colorado in 2015. He was working with this Ask It. So he set up this Ask It for this Ask It for Equity Tribunal. I've had no involvement in that. He's been using my name in that tribunal. Okay. And they're not Aboriginal. Clan Mother Matriarchal Council. Okay, I don't know who these clan mothers are either. See, I don't know any information. I'm up here I was told that they would look after the community while I was in recovery. And I honestly believe now they're thinking I was going to pass away. And it's complicated.
And so, they're selling citizenship or adoption into their community, if you will.
Yeah, that would be a good representation of what they're doing. And they're asking for donations and everything. And then they're also selling their corporate enterprises, stuff on the website.
And sovereigns versus nationals, talking about, the legal arguments from the sovereign citizens movement.
Yeah.
I guess.
Well, there's no such thing as sovereigns in Canada or the United States. That's all bogus. It's a misinterpretation of the law. I believe they're selling medicine training, which they can't do, selling some kind of a money.
They're also doing a legal class, and what he's trying to say is they're doing a legal course. I believe a gentleman there was doing a full 2-3 weeks course of Indigenous law classes based around UNDRIP. And they also were doing a healer's practitioner course for $250, as well as then having people sign up for a trust called Tumult that is also being looked into and investigated. All funds that, if they were coming in, they should be coming to the ASMIN community, of which our understanding currently is that Grand Chief, and he can answer this. I just wanted to bounce in and help him because I understand that, as he just said, there's a lot of layers to the onion that's being peeled back, and there's a lot of it that is still to be uncovered. The bottom line is finances and the funding that has come in has been unaccounted to Grand Chief, unaware of where any of the funds are or even the total amount. But I yield and pass the mic.
And I just, for clarification, when you say it's being investigated, who is investigating this?
Currently, Indian Affairs is being spoke with, as well as RCMP on all levels across the border, because this is international fraud, as well as he mentioned earlier, internet issues. They're selling funds through the internet. Our last note was that they had started charging $75 to be a member, and then $75 to print it out as well. So you're looking at $150 per person for membership alone.
And then there are ongoing fees with most of these as well.
Every year. It was a yearly fee. And as many members have pointed out, you don't keep getting readopted every year. So what was the fee for that they upped it to in February? A lot of things that the members are discussing, as well as with Grand Chief trying to sort through exactly, funds. So I would like to say that as part of this investigation, there is a public notice going to be going out to anyone who did an ASMIN membership fee, has paid anything. They need to reach out and let us know. I know I gave you my contact last time, but there will be a public notice as well with an admin to a tribunal that is also helping look into this that I can send over to you for display. So if anybody's listening and they need to report that they paid funds into ASMIN, that please come forward and let us speak with you and ensure that the funds are going in the right place and accounted for as well as part of this investigation.
Do you have any idea how much money we're talking about or how many people might have been affected?
I yield that to Grand Chief. I know he's been doing a lot of digging himself thus far, but I'll let him answer what he is aware of currently. I yield.
Yeah, thanks, Chief. It's very complicated, and because this stuff is being investigated by the proper authorities, I'm not sure what I'm saying, but it's believed to be well over 1,000 members recently. They would not release that information to me at all. That was released through someone else in our community that found that number out. But it's huge. And with all the other stuff, they were selling phones as well, and they got a new survival kit. All this is totally new to me. And you did ask a question earlier. Yes, I've been involved with my own family line up until I put that resignation letter in as I'm resigning. That was my counter to what they're doing, so the card deck would collapse. And immediately they took my whole family, all the history of the nation, they took it off the website, which I didn't control. They controlled that. And there's another gentleman is quasi trying to pretend that he's the head now. He's the Grand Chief. And none of them will prove their ancestry. There might be someone who has an Aboriginal ancestry, and you have to be Aboriginal in Canada. You have to go by the Constitution of Canada because that's who controls Canada. And they respect those Aboriginals based on those criteria of definition. And the new people that are in ASMIN are in fraud because it's not a sovereign citizen entity, ASMIN. It is an Aboriginal community based on historic family lines and community lines and interrelationship lines. Like I was joking to you earlier, with all the interrelations of the Aboriginal communities, I'm my own cousin 250 ways. You have to prove that, especially in a court of competent jurisdiction. So where we have here is there's two things when they're selling a certificate on medical training. Okay. In Ontario, there's the Regulator Health Professions Act, which says that the only people who are exempt from that act are Aboriginal healers and Aboriginal midwives. Well, if you're not an Aboriginal, you can't get a certificate from a quasi group that's teaching some kind of medicine. I have no idea what they were teaching. That's a con right there, and they're collecting money on it. Teaching law when two of the perpetrators have lost their jurisdiction to practice law, are teaching this new law, which is all bogus, the sovereign citizen movement, because it's not based on anything, stating that the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People give them rights as Indigenous people because they were born here. Well, they didn't look at the interpretation. That's an international word for the first people around the world who are actually Aboriginal. And people don't like the word Aboriginal because supposedly they say it means abrogate your originalness. Well, that's not what it means. The people don't know the actual words, where they come from, where they originally arrived in the Oxford Dictionary, which is the basis of colonial law. So it's a constant con. So you asked me a question. I've been involved. Yeah, I've been involved with my family all my life. And that's what this ASMIN was based on. My family genealogy is one of the main families of Métis in Eastern Canada and in Western Canada, because they're my relations out there too. And I've got relations in most of the First Nations. So that interconnectivity is what Champlain said. You have to have a new race of people. You have to have a whole bunch of people to make a race. And that's my family background. And I'm pretty well related to most First Nations. From the Rocky Mountains to the East Coast. I'm Mi'kmaq as well. I'm Anishinaabe here. I'm Algonquin Huron. I'm Abenaki. It just goes on and on.
But I guess one of the keys to all of this is getting the federal government or even provincial governments, depending on the case, to recognize your community as a nation, within a nation, as we have through treaties with other
under the Royal
indigenous populations.
You're right, Rick. And after I left Indian Affairs as the acting senior scientific advisor, like I said, in 2004, after the Daniels, the Powley case, that's when we had another group steal our name because they figured they could get money from that, right? So I changed the name. But under the Royal Proclamation, which was upheld in Part 1 of the Constitution of Canada, we have Aboriginal rights based on pre-Constitution and even after Constitution and treaty rights if we have a treaty. But there's rights that can come later when you go into treaty negotiations. So February 11, 2009, we submitted a comprehensive claim to the United Nations, the Queen, and all the territories and provinces of Canada. Only 3 provinces responded. The federal government refused to respond. But eventually, a year or so later, the lawyers from Indian Affairs called up and said, "What do you want?" I said, "Well, I don't know what I want right now until we sit down and sit at the table that your law says we have to sit down to negotiate. It's called federal responsibility, duty to consult, duty to accommodate. You haven't accommodated and you haven't facilitated a meeting yet." And they said, "Well, we don't have a Métis land claim policy, so you're going to have to sue us." I said, "Well, I'll sue you sometime in the future when I have the money to go to courts, because I know that's that limiting issue. The Polly and the Daniel case took 34 years. So it's going to be a while. I'll get back to you." So just before the Trudeau government got in 2016, I resubmitted our comprehensive claim. And the Queen responded in 5 weeks or 6 weeks. Government still hasn't responded, Canada. But the Trudeau government, sorry, I got ahead of myself. The Queen sent to the Governor General of Canada a note to get this thing going. So under the Royal Proclamation, those requirements to negotiate a treaty if you're on our lands, right? The Harper government started to negotiate with us. And they said, "Well, we got a problem. We don't have a Métis land claim policy, but we're starting to develop that. We've hired a guy to do this." He was from out west. I talked to him, and we'll get back to you. So I was talking to the head of the Indian land claims policy, and she said, "Well, you need to talk to this gentleman." So I went to talk to that gentleman. It took me 9 months to find out that he no longer worked there. And so the new guy, this is just before Trudeau got elected, he said, "We don't have a policy yet." And so when Trudeau got elected, I resubmitted the comprehensive claim, and the Trudeau government hasn't responded to this date. And all the letters that we've gone to the Trudeau government, they refused to negotiate. And they fired that gentleman who was going to do a comprehensive Métis land claim settlement policy. They fired him and he didn't get a job when the Trudeau come in. So this is what we have, is we have a government that doesn't facilitate their fiduciary responsibility, duty to consult, duty to accommodate Aboriginal communities that are there. And the history's there. They've got all my history. They hired me as an Aboriginal with Indian Affairs Without Competition. They put me on an international treaty negotiation with the U.S. as one of the 2 Canadian Aboriginals to sit at this treaty, and we sat on the Institution and Governance workshop to negotiate the treaty. Then I come home and they say, "Oh, we don't recognize you anymore." So it's all politics. It's all politics because they're afraid of and this is my analysis, I could be wrong, based on the fact that the extensive genealogy that's been done on the Eastern Métis, the numbers are staggering, and the government is afraid of what it's going to cost them. And that's what the lawyers said to me when I met with them around 2010. What's this going to cost us? I said, "I don't know. We haven't sat down and talked." So that's the issue. But Canada, who's supposed to be a multinational or multicultural country, right? They use the word, "We don't recognize you," because they don't fund you. But we're the only race in Canada has to prove our ethnicity. If
Well,
I want,
that's really, again, at the heart of the matter, right? It's about, as I listened to your quote there that I played for you, said about racial purity. That's not really at the heart of the matter. It's really about being adopted in a proper way and whether you're born here. But that, and even if I listen to on that website, they have, I mean, even here, if I'll just play a little bit of it. And what they're saying really is that pretty much anybody, if can be adopted into this
Well, yes,
community.
if you're born on Turtle Island, then you are indigenous to Turtle Island. The scope of Turtle Island is lots of fun to discuss, but for now we'll say it's North America, South America, and the Caribbean. And so if somebody's born in Toronto, I ask them, you know, are you indigenous? And they automatically say no. Once or twice in the last year that I've been asking this question, they stop first and go, it depends how you define indigenous. And so the British Empire, the King and Queen of England, and the Crown, this thing called the Crown, tried to divide people born here by keeping some of them with their roots back in Europe under the European crown system, a feudal system actually, that continued on over here under their thumb, and versus the indigenous according to the clan mother. And so somebody born in Toronto is, you know, who's 60 odd years old, is just as indigenous as the clan mother. They're born on Turtle Island. So you have allegiance to two nations, if you'd like. It's democracy. We're free people. You can be a Canadian citizen with trappings, paying tax, etc., and the benefits of that.
Okay, I don't need to play the rest of it. I mean, look, if no wonder the government's afraid, if that would make me indigenous under that definition.
everybody who wasn't a recent immigrant would be indigenous, but that's not what indigenous means. The Constitution of Canada says Aboriginal people. Indigenous has no wording in there other than the compliance with the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, which means those indigenous people around the world who are the first people of those lands. It's a different definition. Saying that if you were born here, you're indigenous. No, you're just one of the colonial subjects of the crown. You're a serf. And that's it.
So is there a path for someone like me to become part of the ASMIN community?
Okay, I have another video out there somewhere. You might be able to find it, where I talk about the adoption. There's community rights and there's Aboriginal rights. And I was very explicit in a number of videos.
You did mention that, yes.
Community rights is what the community gives you as rights. You can come in and work with us. You can be with us. We might even let you build a house on, beside me or something, right? And because you're supporting the community, but you can't go hunting and fishing without a license. You can't get the benefits from the crown, no taxation and stuff, living on a reserve. You don't get those rights. You get community rights. You can come in, help in the kitchen if you want. Not that I'm saying you're just going to be doing work, but you may come in and be an educator and educator our people, right? That's a community right to come on the land. You got the same thing on First Nations. You can be barred from going on to the reserves if they don't like you. Only those that they like can come on. That's a community right, right? But you don't have any Aboriginal rights, and it's very explicit that even corporations, which I mentioned to you before, corporations under Supreme Court ruling says you may have Aboriginal members in your not-for-profit corporation, like Métis Nation of Ontario, the Congress of Aboriginal People, the Assembly of First Nations, right? On all those ones, they could have they have Aboriginal members, but those corporations have no Aboriginal rights.
So, but the people who are paying these fees to become part of an ASMIN community are doing it largely because they're people with my kind of heritage who are afraid of losing property rights under UNDRIP, which internationally is not binding, except that in Canada, the Trudeau government has gone a step further to say, yes, we are going to make this legislation binding. And even though it says in UNDRIP the United Nations Declaration of Rights for Indigenous Peoples, that it is that document is not meant to undermine the sovereignty of any existing nation state. The Trudeau government has gone a step further to pass legislation within Canada to integrate unilaterally, voluntarily, UNDRIP into our system, our colonial system here. And this is also, I think, where part of the concern comes from, where people are now worried that they're going to lose their property rights under this new system. So they want protection, the same kinds of protections that they think are there for Aboriginals or people. So they want to become part of the ASMIN community. Is that accurate?
I understand their concern, but then again, remember I said they don't teach, they don't educate. Under Canadian law, there's the Expropriation Act. They can take your land anytime they want. I also mentioned earlier in this conversation is that your mortgage or your deed to your title.
No, but to back up, yeah, they can expropriate land, but in practice, they do provide compensation generally at least market value or above.
Yes, and I'm getting to that, Rick. You're correct.
Sure,
quite right. But where we're looking at Aboriginal rights or lands being reverted back to the Aboriginal people, the Canadian government or its predecessors stole that land without treaty. Go back to the Constitution of Canada and the Royal Proclamation. You can't do fraud. You can't steal the land of Aboriginal people. It's ingrained in the Constitution. It's part 1 of the Constitution of those rights. You took our land, you stole it under the Indian Act. You have to compensate us. So it's no different than they want to put a highway through your property. You're gone because you just have a certificate of occupation. They will compensate you. There's an example right now is just on the news on the North Shore of Georgian Bay. There's an island that people have had cottages for 100 years, and they're expropriating all of that and giving it back to the First Nation, which is a band under the Indian Act, and they're turning it back into a ecological land again, a nature preserve or whatever, right? But they're going to be compensated. And there's other examples all over that in Ontario that the Indian Affairs back before the 60s rented out land to non-Aboriginals on the reserve, and they're still there, and they're eventually removing them. So in regards to a major land claim, okay, people aren't going to lose their land. That's fear-mongering by the government to cause confusion as far as I'm concerned, because there's a process. And a lot of these processes on what they call under the Indian Act, addition to reserve, takes time. When I was with Indian Affairs back, or Environment Canada in 1980, they were talking about an addition to reserve on one of the reserves in North Shore, Georgian Bay, and they still haven't completed it because those people haven't got to a point where they're selling their property, and that's when the government comes in. There's a process. It's well established in Canadian law. This fear mongering about I'm going to lose my property, they're getting rights back, but you're sitting on stolen land. And under the Criminal Code of Canada, if you got something stolen, that's a criminal violation. So how, when you look at the
I'm following what you're saying. Yeah. Is it fair to say that some of these people who are using the ASMIN name are exploiting that fear to get people to pay the fees to become part of their communities? Yeah.
Exactly, Rick. It's the whole thing. There are so many layers in what they're doing to the ASMIN. There's so many layers. I'm just peeling it,
And because your name has been attached to this for a long time, we're now hearing from you guys that we have RCMP, Indian Affairs, we have probably the FBI and maybe even CSIS investigating this. I don't know if formal investigations have been opened, but you're certainly in conversation with them and have lodged, I guess, formal complaints asking for an investigation or investigations into this as a possible international case of multiple cases, possibly of fraud on a huge scale, massive story, massive issue. Am I on the right track here?
Well, it's huge. It's huge. And where it is that be coming out of surgery and being ill for the last 6 years, right?
Yeah.
That's elder abuse. It's abusing a medically incapacitated person. I'm just coming out of it and I realize things are wrong. But for me, where I'm way up north trying to figure out what they're doing, they're not telling me. Sometimes when to kill a scam, you got to counter scam. You got to figure it out. You got to lull them into a false sense of security so you can get the information. Once I got enough information that I could make a complaint to the government, I did it. And that's where we are. So
and so speaking of government, I'm sorry.
One more point.
Sure.
In these type of scams, the first reaction for most people, and I was in the regulatory authority for a long time with the feds in the province, right? I did this stuff, these investigations, right?
Yeah.
People always seem to blame the victim. Well, why didn't you do something about it? Why didn't you do, how come you didn't know, right? Well, if you got a really good scam, you don't know. And it's really hard to figure out what the heck's going on. Well, we'll tell you later. And it's okay. We've got it handled. You got all this great stuff going into the courts, but it's all bogus. And I'll go to the ask it for equity. You under the UNDRIP and some of the other, I think it's Deschantel and some of the other ones, you can have an Aboriginal tribunal. But you got to be Aboriginal, you got to be a member of a community. So that one lawyer setting up the ASCIT, which is ASMIN and Kinniqui Judicial Tribunal, where's your Aboriginal? Well, you put me on there as a Chief Justice. I've never done anything in it, but I find out they're putting emails out of my name and communicating with people. I had nothing to do with that tribunal. Then they set up the AIN, Alliance of Indigenous Nation Judicial Tribunal, doing all kinds of submissions into courts and everything, and orders and everything, and there's no Aboriginals that are running it. So how is that an Aboriginal tribunal, not based on anything other than their con? It looks good because there was a treaty that I suggested, and I went down to Bolivia, met with the presidents down there. They wanted to set up an international Aboriginal United Nations, working on it. They wanted to reestablish the Eagle and the Condor prophecy. I brought back, suggested it. Some people were doing a really good job writing up this treaty. They started the treaty up, and then all of a sudden there's this AIN Judicial Tribunal doing international cases into court, and the people running it were disbarred judges and lawyers and non-Aboriginal.
Yeah, and I think that one of those disbarred lawyers actually ran for mayor in Toronto, and he's connected with one of these groups as well. I don't know if it's wise to really mention his name here.
It's difficult when but people need to know that there's something going on that is not right. And people do get duped. That's what they call cons. And that's what they call scams. And that's what they call internet scam. And you put it on the internet and you're explaining all these benefits you get. Like one thing, when they had the Tumult Trust up, Rick, you get 50% return on your money right on the website. Came down pretty damn quick.
To explain what the Tumult Trust is.
Damned if I know, to tell the truth, and I'll be polite because I've asked for a definition for that.
I can answer a little of that, but please do take note. There is open investigation. There is open case files. So it does kind of gag us to not be able to speak a lot.
And we should also state that any of the allegations related to any investigations or any possible illegal activity have not been proven in court. So
everything that I've said has been alleged. I verily believe that the things that I'm saying would be accurate. I should have said that up front, but I forgot.
Yeah,
it totally is. So let's just note that this Tumult Trust was a trust of Turtle Island that you were supposed to put your assets, your house, your car, gold mine, anything that was yours to put into the Tumult, which went back to askitforequity.com page and link as well. It is currently under full investigation as well. So Again, I state that with all sincerity. There are case files already assigned. The investigations are moving forward, and it does kind of bind us to what we can say. But tumult, if anybody also tumult, or you're one of those people that was in the AIN and you were given an AIN order, please note the downfall that is coming from that. As recent as over the last 2 to 3 weeks, people are using or trying to use those orders. They have no standing. They are not binding. Please come forward and contact us as well so we can deal with any of those orders and have them addressed and accounted for as well.
Okay. Now, is it because of your past involvement with these people, these organizations, it must be fair to assume that they're probably investigating you as well, wondering how legitimate you are, how sincere you are in your assertions here, saying that this isn't really your doing. They've got to be looking at you too, and that must be a major concern for you.
It's not a concern, Rick, because I'm familiar with the court system. I was a federal regulator, provincial regulator. Once I got enough information that I could make a case, I submitted that letter to all the federal authorities, the law societies, the RCMP. They all got my initial. Essentially, the way it works, I would be first witness, right? And when it comes down to what they were doing, I have enough witnesses to prove that I didn't know anything about it. So I had to play along with some things in it, but you got to do that to expose the con. When you have to report a con of this magnitude, you have to have some fairly significant evidence, or the regulators will not buy in that they have something to, like if people complain that they had $100 billion removed, sure, they go after those Ponzi scams, big ones. But when it's subtle and it's identity fraud, identity theft, corporate theft, right, all those, you got to stack them.
But because of your association with these groups, it's smearing your reputation and throwing a lot of things in question. Because even as I go back and I look at some newspaper articles, I see that you, there's references made to you. I think there was a tobacco farmer here in Ontario who claimed to be part of an ASMIN community, ended up in court because he was trying to evade taxes, and then they're mentioning you as going to court to, I guess, support him as a member of the community, but the government not recognizing it. So this becomes very, very complicated. So how does that all play into this?
I'll explain that. Before that case, there was a case in BC, and the case in BC, which I didn't know anything about it until recently, my name was on it, and then the court said I can no longer put any cases into court. I didn't know anything about it. I just come out of surgery. I just got back to Canada, right? Mm-hmm. And then that tobacco case, well, guess what? A day before the court case, I was asked to go and sit there and pretend I was someone, and I didn't know anything about the case, right? And that was when they said I was in the court. The lawyer said I was an Indian guru. And they said I was all dressed up in Aboriginal garb, which is BS. And they made fairly racial, and I had no idea. I don't want to emphasize my medical recovery, but I was suffering from COVID at that time, right? So they had me come into a couple of cases. I didn't know what till the last minute. And I don't have to justify as the victim of the identity that I was the victim, right? Like if you're the victim, yeah, they're going to dupe you on things, right? But that's all right. I'm an open book. They can get whatever information they want, and they will see that I was duped, and they were abusing me, abusing my trust, stealing my name, putting emails out that Wabiska at equity.com and telling people that they're me and communicating with them, and I have no knowledge of that email or being part of that email. It's identity theft. It's a very smooth con, from my point of view, allegedly. Okay.
And then you've got these people going through these naming ceremonies as well, and this stuff's readily available online as well. Can you explain
Who was doing
what's that?
ceremony?
So here's
Oh,
this. What's that all about? Because I don't really understand. And we see some pretty prominent politicians here: Patrick Brown and Tony Clement, former finance minister of Ontario. Brown, the former leader of the Ontario PCs, now mayor of Brampton. This gentleman here, Mr. Lowe, I believe his name was, and then Patrick Brown signing this certificate for him, recognizing his naming and his colonial name, I guess, I think was Hedlow or something like that. And then, but his name here, Big Bear Running, to become part of the ASMIN community. There's Mr. Brown's signature. Can you explain what that is all about and when that took place and how you were involved? Because you were at this ceremony as well, right?
Yeah, I officiated that. They asked me to officiate at a naming ceremony. Is fine. They had drummers down from up in Midland and everything. It was a nice little get together, a little powwow. Naming ceremonies are fine. Anyone can have a spirit name. Okay. This was another group out of Barrie that had a small little group, a private little group, a community, right? And they wanted to have a naming ceremony. But the Mr. Lau, the gentleman with the Métis sash, all that, Tony Clement and all that, he used to work for Tony Clement. So he got Tony Clement to come down and do a naming ceremony, and I officiated the naming ceremony. But they weren't part of ASMIN.
Okay.
That was just a naming ceremony, just like pulling down any elder to come down and do a naming ceremony. I did a naming ceremony with them, and they had another gentleman who has a big film industry. He came and filmed and took interviews and everything of everybody. It was a kind of nice event, which is fine. There was no con on that because everybody at the naming ceremony were all relatives that were working with Mr. Lowe, and they all wanted spirit names. So they got spirit names.
Now here's that lady in the center right there. There's you with her.
Yeah.
Is that not the lady from the Power Shift?
I have no idea. I can't remember. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's who it is. So then she was named at this ceremony as well, and now she's online and part of. She seems to be part of this network, either loosely or even directly involved with this freedom movement. She calls it the Power Shift, and they're on there selling memberships into this, what they call the Canadian People's Union, talking about really, I would characterize it as common law information, coming up with like legal remedies to these things. It seems to me that this is another case where maybe it's not an appropriate use of a spirit name, and she's not really pushing her spirit name when I watch her videos, but she certainly continuously talks about the need for integration or to work for colonial settlers to work with or become part of First Nations or Aboriginal communities. It's all through her work. This, to me, ties right into everything that you've been saying, where it's just it's like a carbon copy of the blueprint, right?
Well, it seems, Rick, like all these ones coming originally from the U.S., the sovereign citizen. You can get them all over to YouTube there on stuff like that. But they're all grabbing certain things that sounds good and utilizing in their own stories.
Yeah.
And I can't comment on what all these other people are.
Sure.
All I can comment on is that there is a movement out there. It's a big movement because everybody's really ticked off with their governments. Really ticked off that the governments are spending more money than they should be and doing silly things. And also a lot of people, like I'm not against immigration, right? But a lot of people are really ticked off that, like in the U.S., bringing all the immigrants across the border illegally, right, to boost up their numbers. Because if you come in illegally and they let you in here, you're going to vote for them. And it's all voting friendly. I'll bring the people in so they vote. You look at our current government, no disrespect. I know a lot of, how would I say, ethnic people from around the world. Some, even my brother-in-law was an ethnic from another world, another country, right? I have no problems with that. But people who have been here for a while get a little upset about what's going on both in Canada and the United States. It's all this woke stuff, everything. There's so much confusion. So that gives you the opportunity to infiltrate and look for those people that are needy, want something, and let's sell them a story that maybe they'll give them some hope. In the meantime, pay for contributing this noble attempt to do something in the future, right? My case, I had a legal land claim into the government. They refused to meet because there's 640 some other land claims ahead of me, right? The Queen instructed the Governor General to instruct Trudeau to negotiate, as by their law under the Royal Proclamation. They're on unsurrendered lands. And there's a lot, every treaty in Canada, as far as I'm concerned, as a lay person in law, in international law, if you violate one section of a treaty, the whole treaty is null and void. Every treaty in Canada is null and void, except maybe some of the current ones, because they violate different sections, right? So it's a big mess that the government themselves created. So when the governments create a venue for someone to come in and create a really good scam. And if these people who are doing the scam are very well educated, they're going to manipulate it so it sounds really good, and let's get the money flow. Oh, and in my case, let's not tell the chief how much money's coming in. Let's put it in our own bank accounts, right? And if you go back, and I know you researched, some of those other videos I did, I said we're self-supporting by our own contributions. We've never asked for any money. And one of the later videos I did while I'm trying to figure out what's going on said, we haven't asked for money from the government. We don't want to ask for money. We just want that right that says they have to come down by their laws and sign treaty with us. So that's
as part of that process, though, you would get reconciliation, and that would lead to, I would think, payments. And also, I mean, if you look at it,
well, I wouldn't make that. I wouldn't make that assumption, Rick, because they only give money to those people they've already signed treaty to, and every other group in Canada that says, "Hey, we're this group and we're that group," and let's fund money, because if I fund that money in that local riding, I get all the votes from them, right? Mm-hmm. But as a multicultural Canada, I'm the only group with all my relatives that we can't self-profess to be who we are. That's a really strange situation. So when we're trying to fight for our rights, everybody's saying we're taking away from their rights. I don't get funded. I've been on the poverty row for like 20 years because of my medical disabilities.
It becomes very, complex when you start to look at it. It depends on the lens you look at it through. But even as I go to this Facebook page, ASMIN of Turtle Island, this is
that one.
Right. I'm sorry, what's that?
I don't even recognize that one.
Yeah, well, you're on here.
I do.
they put you on.
I recognize it. They've got you in a couple of places that I think they may have forgotten that you're still up there.
And this is just you with a holiday greeting, a video that whoever they are, put up. And then, but this was interesting. This is, this led me down a path, an interesting path. This gentleman here, Errol Star Francis, he, born in Jamaica, as far as I can tell, yet a Juno award-winning performer, described here on this Facebook page as one of the original, or one of the first, how did they put this here? I'll get you to comment on it, but he's supposed to be one of the first Ask It Council members. one of the first, right there at the top. I highlighted it. So he's one of the first, but he's originally, I guess, from Jamaica. But you know, it seems to me that he has this entertainment company called Tribes, Tribz, right? And then I think again, this, and you comment for me, is this an appropriate use of an association with an ASMIN community? Because it looks to me like he's availing himself of federal arts grants in order to make music videos and find legitimacy within the Canadian entertainment industry, while saying that he's part of an Aboriginal or Indian, or whatever language you care to use at any given time, group. But he's from Jamaica. Now, I guess by extension, that's part of Turtle Island, but I'm not sure that the government of Canada owes someone like Errol Starr Francis anything based on any of this. But it's pretty easy, again, to convince even politicians or bureaucrats who are looking to virtue signal to bring someone like that in. I mean, I see how this all works, right? So please clarify or explain to me what the heck is going on with that.
Well, Rick, you have just joined my
Hit
club.
the nail on the head. Yes.
You joined my club, and I'll verily believe everything you said is correct. It's exposing the cons and the multi-layers of cons. And when you look at the opportunity with the government giving out monies to everybody and ethnic groups and everything, boy, that would be a good candidate to give money to support the Black Month when we have an Aboriginal Day, right?
Well, he checks a lot of the boxes, right? Yeah, for political correctness.
I'll let you say that what your comments are something that should be looked into. I didn't even know this was there, right? And if this is the case, it's all promotion based on Indigenous, which they use, right? And him, the first founding member of a council. Up until recently, I didn't even know they set up all these new councils. And guess what, Rick? I was never invited to sit on any council. Well, that's interesting if it's the ASMIN up until the 1st of May, I guess, or the end of April. ASMIN was all about me on the original website that they've taken down, the ASMIN of Turtle Island. It's my genealogy, all my family names. The clan mother is First Nation was mentioned there. There was a bitchway to a First Nation Aboriginal. All that stuff was there until I said, and I was the flea in the ointment, right? Because as I'm still there, you don't know how to get rid of me. As soon as I said, "Oh, I'm retiring," right? And then the whole card deck expose the multi-layers of, I'm going to use it, I'll give credit, ingenious thought, right?
Well, I'm not saying even that Errol Starr Francis has done anything illegal, but he certainly seems to know how to work the system.
Rick, I'm going to interject. Did I hear you say something along the lines that Errol Starr Francis had received funding and grants through this?
I mean, he's won a Juno Award. I know how the system works, right? So when I go watch his videos, it's a high budget Canadian entertainment industry. They're
funding somewhere is what you're
and they become eligible. They become eligible for a wide variety of arts grants to produce music videos because you check the boxes. That's how those things work, whether it's the Canada Council or, I mean, you go down the list, right? So by associating himself with an ASMIN nation and even being one of the original founders, this opens doors to funding. And if you go look at his videos, I won't play it because of copyright issues, but I mean, it's high budget. I've never heard of the guy before. I don't know how many people watch his stuff. It's not in my in my sphere of entertainment choices. I don't listen to that kind of music, but this is serious money.
Yes,
right?
it is.
to produce
Yes.
that kind of material.
It is.
If you're going to
Along
do
with
it,
a lot of the other things that we're seeing come out of all of this. So I would like to ask Grand Chief a question and have his answer on here. If you have people, and I'm having them come to me currently, who are or have been a part of this ASMIN situation and they were members, now they're going to somewhere else because they can't get the click button to work in ASMIN, so they want to join somewhere else. They are scattering like flies off manure when you walk by because they realize that something's going on inside of ASMIN. So what's your answer to them when they say they're going to go find somewhere else to sign up at, and there's no background or no lineage check? You can just anybody join.
well, in the vernacular of investigations, called collateral damage. Buyer beware. There is so much going on that there's no way I could even comprehend all the different cons and subcons and criminalities that could potentially verily believe to be going on. Everybody is looking for something because, and it's my opinion, I verily believe it's because of the way the government of Canada has been running for many years. It's all directed about getting, and this is my opinion, them making sure they get elected every 2 years or whatever, every 4 years, twice, so they can get their pensions. And they have no idea what a government is all about. A lot of amateurs running the government of Canada and the United States. And it's all about getting their retirement benefits. And when it comes down to people that have real issues like Aboriginal rights, well, look at what Trudeau's done in regards to the reconciliation. Sweet F all, right? F is just a letter, so I can say that, right? Yeah, it's difficult times. All they're worrying about is getting elected. Why do we have millions of refugees coming in to Canada at this juncture in time? What was the need, right? We don't have housing. They're all getting, I could get into the United States issue, which I'm following as well. Millions of people flooding into our countries. Is that part of the New World Order? So when it comes down to little old me and my nation and my family, we're of no significance. So anyone who's got a really good con can work the con. And that's where we're at. But
the difficult thing here is that based on because of the way the law has evolved, the interpretations, UNDRIP, all of these things, these other groups can, in my view, kind of put forward similar arguments to justify what they're doing based on adoption into an ASMIN community, and then it becomes very cloudy even within the court system. So even when you get these rulings like the Daniels ruling, that they're saying, well, it only applies from Ontario West. It doesn't apply to people out in Eastern Canada. And they're picking and choosing who gets rights and who doesn't, even through this system. It becomes very complicated. And I'm not even sure if these rulings we're getting through the court system are fair or balanced or even accurate.
Well, then they never are. They never are. But that's a functionality of the actual corrupt government itself. The government is not there to run the nation for the people that are supporting the nation through taxation. And this is where they allow these sovereign entities, sovereign citizen entities, start to have all these anarchy groups come in underneath their watch because they're not providing what they're supposed to do as the board of directors, as the corporation of the Constitutional Monarchy of Canada. They're supposed to be running an official, effective government.
So clarify this for me. What is the difference? Like, I don't really completely buy into like Canada is only a corporation. It is a sovereign nation state.
It's not a sovereign nation state. Okay, Rick.
Okay.
You're right in the meat of it. Okay. Mm-hmm. Terminologies. Canada is a trade colony still of Britain. The Constitution 1982 wasn't signed in Canada. It was signed in Great Britain. And I don't think it still has had the approval of the Privy Council of England. So what is it? It's a trade corporation. The Constitution of Canada is actually a letter of marque by the Crown to do business in Canada. I found it very interesting when I was trying to find out what this constitutional monarchy of Canada was. Remember when they had the annual report, and Harper government put the annual report, and they had all these advertisements of all the greatness that Canada was doing. It's the report to the U.S. Security Commission. And still, if you go into the Edgars, which is the U.S., I forget what Edgars is for. It's the money thing.
Yep, it's like the CRA and the IRS. It's literally tells you that they are part of the U.S. And the address is in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and if you call up, the last time I checked, I called up the number. It went to Revenue Canada, right? They're corporations. Okay, so
my question is, what's the difference between that and your corporation, which you set up? And why are you any more legitimate than that?
Well, the corporation I've got is not legitimate because it's a license from the government of Canada to have that name.
Yeah.
But it's just to protect the name. It's like a copyright. That's it.
Or a trademark.
But even that protection, though, stems from the colonial system, the Canadian system, right? No. That's all.
Imagine if there was nothing on it. What would Grand Chief have done right now?
Well, right. I mean, I'm not criticizing you for it. I'm just kind of trying to make a point that any political system is a construct. It's what people believe ultimately and what the people end up supporting, either because they're afraid through coercion and tyranny at the end of the gun, or because as a community, we all decide together that this is what we are going to support and make legitimate. So that can extend to either an ASMIN community, or it could be, the Canadian government, or even a one world government if people ultimately ended up supporting that, either through fear or voluntarily. But I'll throw it back to you for comment.
Yeah, Rick, you're right. And the issue here is not the World Economic Forum or the United Nations, what is the definition of a nation? A nation is an old boys club. I've got a military, you've got a military. Let's not fight, so we'll recognize each other. That old word recognition. Okay, well, I got might, you've got might, so let's be friends, right? That's all recognition is. I'm going to fund you because you're helping me do something else, right? I'll fund you, and then you'll do what I say because I fund you. All these things are wrapped up in everything we're talking about today. So if you have someone, I'll just say alleged, that's legitimate, has an Aboriginal ancestry, has a family history, goes back to the whole founding of New France, who is saying, hey guys, your rules say that you're supposed to come and sign treaty to me, because anyone who in the Royal Proclamation, which is in their constitution, which is upheld by the Queen or the King now, right? Because that's where our constitution was signed. It says if anyone does any frauds in my territory, right?
Yep.
You have to bring them to the Crown and be charged with malfeasance of treason in the Royal Proclamation. They're supposed to be charged with treason. Harper government removed treason from the Criminal Code of Canada, but the Constitution is supreme to the Criminal Code of Canada. So where we have is you've got structures that are huge, that have got history to them. And how do you change that? Well, you don't.
And like it or not, you still have to work within that system, even as you seek remedy to these legal digressions against you, as you're asserting here, because you don't have a police force, you don't have a military, you don't have a legal system of your own, so you have to rely on RCMP, CSIS, FBI, other organizations, Indian Affairs even, to assist you in finding some sort of justice for this.
Going back to your comment, how come you let this happen? Essentially, I'm not saying that you said it exactly. Like you were involved with these people and it basically happened on your
I hadn't
watch.
thought of it in those terms, but yeah, I guess, yeah.
And I accept that, right? I knew it was happening on my watch, but how do I break that multi-generational dysfunctionality of the Canadian government and how they interact with voters so they can get voting and all those complex of the world economic. Who am I? I'm just one person who's representing my family, right? And I got to break it down and get it to a point where I can actually take it to those official regulators to do something to destroy this whole new philosophy of pretend Indian and infiltrating for funding. Like that lady who went up to Inuvik or wherever, or, up in the north, who said her 2 daughters were Inuit and she got hundreds of thousands of dollars. She's being arrested again for another fraud, right? You know, you get these pretend Indians that go to university and get all this stuff, right? And they say, you know, they get all these, well, the whole, you know, the whole pretend Indian thing, right?
Well, the Buffy St. Marie story that CBC did the big expose on, and all of these things. And, you know, it seems to me too, Grand Chief, that, yeah. And so, and the irony in those photos that I showed is that the government doesn't even recognize ASMIN as a legitimate, in their view, legitimate Aboriginal community. And yet here we have politicians like Patrick Brown and Tony Clement, and who's this other guy? He's he also, I think, ran for the leadership. Rod Jackson, remember one-time prevention. You know, so they're kind of like, I see that as like a virtue signaling on their part, or how are they? I don't know why they're even there involved if they don't if the government doesn't recognize the community. But not to say that every politician views things the same way. What is that again all about?
It's all politicking. You got Tony Clement, who's recognizing his old buddy who's got a small little community, a family-based community in Barrie. You got the federal and the provincial representative for Barrie there. You got a film producer filming everything, right? Hey, we'll get some new votes. And I don't want, and I'll say allegedly that was the motivation for that, right? There was nothing wrong with the get together. It's a family-based Aboriginal community, blah blah blah, and they get some political hits for it. Right.
Yeah. And it looks very virtuous to the general public. Like, look how sensitive I am.
Yeah.
But it
and
also,
how woke.
it also leads to trying to get votes in the end. It's all politic game. And as much as I hate to say this, you guys are discussing, you know, a sensitive subject, enforcement on the side of these nations that are unceded or unbanded nations. You still wind up having to figure out how enforcement is happening, which is what he's leading to here. He's going to have to rely upon some of the colonial system to help enforce the wrongdoing here and cause the consequence from it to fall on the shoulders of those that it's required. In that aspect, though, here we go again. We're nations inside of a nation. And as much as we may not enjoy the colonial system, we know that it's a broke system. We smell the desperation from the colonial people to come in and seek sovereignty through our laws so that they're free from the taxes and the corrupt that's going on in the colonial. The bottom line is just like any other nation. If it's China versus Iran, you're still stuck congregating with them and trying to communicate and make nation to nation work, even though we're inside those soils. So we still have to have the communication door open somewhere along the way with Indian Affairs, FBI, those type of things, even once we do align our own enforcement, should your nation become large enough to be an enforcement of its own. So it's politics all around. And in that instance, it causes all the confusion as well, like the photos you're showing.
Yeah, and some of that earlier, which I don't know how much time you got, Rick, but I'll talk forever because that's what my job is as a chief, right? That it's funny. There was here's what the government does. They hired this gentleman who was a professor at a university. Coincidentally, his family name is one of my family names, right? A French Canadian, to look at all these groups, right? So he never contacted me, refused my emails, and he put me down as some kind of flake little organization. So I'm on the list of flake little organizations because the government funded this guy to just like looking for flying saucers, right? They're all fake, right? Never contacted me. So he's got this federal funding to prove that I don't exist, right? My own federal MP is the head of Aboriginal Affairs here in Canada. She refuses to meet with me. And under the laws in Canada, the only way you get access to a government is to call your federal MP. Well, my federal MP is the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs. So she sent me the latest letter is, well, I can't help you with this pretend Indian issue, but have a wonderful day. That's interesting, right? That shows that obviously I will give her credit. She probably never saw my letter. It's her staff writing these letters out, right? I won't discredit her, but that's a pretty good slap in the face of one of her constituents who's having a major issue with these pretend Indians. At the same time I wrote that letter, they have a big conference in Manitoba about pretend Indians, and they're going to do legislation now against pretend Indians and all that, so they can decrease all these wannabe Indians. All these colonials are, instead of resolving the issue of the government and how they fund things and what they do and how they misappropriate monies and spend money on things they shouldn't do, and the people are all upset, so they're going to punish the people now, right, who are trying to find some resolve. So all these people who sign on to these multitudinous of little Aboriginal communities looking for some relief, or at least I'm doing something, right? We'll join this group to do something, right? You know, I feel sorry for them. There's nothing I can do. I've been on this road for 20 years to resolve my grandfather's request to do something. Because when he sat me on his knee and gave me all my teachings and everything, he was a Métis boat builder, Wabashini. He was a cook at a lumber camp way in, you know, he was born in 1882, my grandfather, right? How do you change that historical context to the future? And he told me, you go learn the colonial ways, you get an education. That's why I went to forestry school, then I went fish and wildlife technology, then got a Bachelor of Science degree, right? And then I got a job with the federal government up in Ottawa, working towards this end, to learn the system, to figure it out, and to do this thing, right? It's difficult. So you've got an ordinary person who hasn't been doing it all their life, and all of a sudden, oh, I have an Aboriginal ancestor, I want my rights. Well, I'm sorry, you're not going to get any rights, because if someone has the legitimacy to get those rights, and the government won't even talk to them, but they'll fund, hey, I'm from Mars, right? I'm purple. I want to set up a community center. Oh, how much money do you want? Right? That's the government. That's how it's a vote-based government. If you can prove to me that you're going to get me votes, I will fund you. But oh, I've stolen your land and we're supposed to sign treaty with you, and we aren't going to meet with you, and we're not going to sign treaty because you might cost us some money, because we know we already stole your land. And right now we've got the colonization of the colonization. It's starting again. Let's bring in all those immigrants like they did when they took over the lands of Louis Riel and Gabriel Dumont and their people out in the Red River Valley. Bring in all the people from Eastern Europe because they're starving, and settle the prairies, right? Oh, those Aboriginals don't have any rights over there. All those colonials have all the rights, right? That's it. So they're duplicating the same process of colonization, right? And they have the divine right to do colonization, though the Pope said they took away the doctrine of discovery, right? Well, if you've taken away the doctrine of discovery and you bought the Rupert's land from the Hudson Bay Company that didn't own it, and now you own the lands that you only had a thing to put forts up and do fur trade, right? It was a letter of marque. So they're doing the piracy thing still. They're doing it again, right? So we won't recognize you, so we can steal your land still. We're continuing the theft of your land. That's what we're living in. Now, I'm not trying to be reactionary or, complain or make complaints, right? It's the...
Well, when I see philosophers or political commentators like Ilan Pape, and when I see what's going on in Gaza and... all of these things. And it's basically this anti-colonial political ideology that is permeating its way all through, really it's global, but here in Canada, it's having serious implications because it ties right into exactly what we're talking about here. It's about Aboriginals, UNDRIP, property rights, land back, these protests that we're seeing going on right now on university campuses, it's been my position that that is not just a Palestinian or Gaza or his Jewish issue or Zionist issue. It ties right into, even more so in Canada, into this very issue we're talking about right here, right now. Can you connect those dots for us?
Oh, they're all connected. It's total chaos, and the World Economic Forum has done it. This climate change issue has done it. There's so much fear out there. See, Churchill said it very nicely. If you keep people in fear, they won't know what's going on in the legislature.
But if these protesters are successful, it seems to me they want to basically tear the system down.
Yes.
And yet, if you're talking about, and I will use the word First Nations who have treaties, those treaties are really protected because of the existence of Canada as a country. If the system is torn down, would those treaties then not become null and void? And would that then not put the sovereignty of those nations within a nation maybe in jeopardy? Does that not put the culture of those First Nations communities in jeopardy? Kind of reset everything? If you want to talk about a great reset, that would be one heck of a great reset, because now you have to kind of revisit a lot of these land rights issues, territorial issues, all over again, right from the very beginning.
Yeah, all of that stuff, what you're saying is true. It's a big, they've done it. And the only way you can get out of that kind of mess is to make wars. And where are we headed right now? Third World War. It's going to happen. Russia's falling apart. North Korea's going crazy. You got wars in Gaza. You got wars in Syria. You know, there's so much going on. And that's part of that whole, as far as I verily believe, the World Economic Forum to make a one world government. And who is Carl Schwab? What is Carl Schwab doing? He's saying that he said it right at Harvard. He owned Trudeau, right? So you've got fractions and different groups that will have no understanding of what's going on. And so if the climate change comes, and there's a bit, you know, there's more pollution coming out of volcanoes than ever did by the anthropogenic environmental contamination. You know, look, you got Naples, that volcano could go off. You got the one, Mount St. Helens is acting up. You got the ones down on the Ring of Fire. They're all, Iceland, if they get that big boom at Iceland, you're going to see pollution all over the place. Yeah. And that will put us in an ice age, right? This climate change is all bogus. It's all about manipulating the stocks and manipulating the markets. It's something that's gone amiss since the Second World War. My dad is a veteran of the war. He lost his leg. He's an amp. He's passed now. His brother was an amp. I lost 3 uncles in World War II. My mom was in the military to protect freedom. And what do we get come back? Oh, we don't recognize you. You know, I had the government, which was pretty good that time, put me on that International Joint Commission to negotiate treaties on the Boundary Waters Treaty Act of 1906 for the Great Lakes water quality. And they appointed 3 Aboriginals, 1 from U.S. and 2 in Canada. I was one of them, to recommend all the things, because I was with the federal government and all the toxic chemicals and all that, right? That was my area of work. And I get back, guess what? I get a phone call from my old boss. Oh, they don't want to recognize you now. Now that you did the job they wanted you to do at the, you know, we're not going to recognize you, not going to talk to you. So it's all about control structures and what the politicians want to do. It has nothing to do with providing proper services to the people that support them through the taxations. You know, billions of dollars going up and all the scandals about Trudeau and everything. It's all there. It's plain to see. So you have all this fake news, etc. And that's where we are right now, because you have the opportunity for scammers to come in and try to get a piece of the gravy. And that's what we're at. And peeling the onion, and it is a stinky onion, peeling that onion to get through all the different permutations of everything. And you picked up one I didn't know about, Errol Francis and his promotion of his, all those websites started to become immediately when even before that, because they were selling some kind of phones that were supposed to tap into everybody's internet, and you get free internet because you're stealing it from someone else, right? There's all these, and Chief there can talk about the phone scenario, right? There's all these scams of them promoting themselves for stuff. Now, in regards to the main scam, is to drive funding into this because you're going to get rights. So they're lying. Invest, and there was even an investment link. Invest in this, and you'll get 50% of your return. Well, that's a security commission fraud, right? You can't say how much you're going to get for an investment. They had it right on the website. Now all that stuff's being pulled down, and they're revamping and everything. Then they got this other ASMIN of the boreal forest. She's the 27th descendant of the Louis of the whatever way back when, right? So how does that give you Aboriginal rights? And she's got my ASMIN my ASMIN name right on her website. But interesting, the Ask It for Equity pulled off, the TUMO pulled off that site. So they're using multiple sites, and they'll probably, unless they're listening to this, they'll probably put up more websites to get people sucked into to fund. It's a massive scam. It's very complex, and I'm still learning more aspects of what they're doing. I had no idea this.
And to be recognized by these organizations is probably not going to help anybody anyway, because the federal government doesn't recognize them. And so if you're trying to assert rights or protect your property rights based on this, still it's the colonial system that ultimately is going to determine whether your property rights are protected or not.
Well, your property rights aren't protected, period, because of the Expropriation Act, right? If they need to put a super highway through like that Star Trek one,
right? But the point being, they're not really providing any kind of a service at all if everything that we have said here holds true.
It's not. It is not. And I beseech everyone to walk with caution with that. As I've said, putting out fires on our end, because we have had more than one try to assert themselves as ASMIN in the courtroom, came back out and told me, called me up. I didn't even know the person, basically told me I just got slapped in the face with a wet towel by the judge, who literally said, what do you expect out of this? What is your lineage? Because there is some onus on you to prove your lineage. And anywhere that is signing you up as a membership without asking any of those questions for the rights that you're trying to claim, tax-free. I have rights that you can't take my children, so forth and so on. These things have to be proven. You can't just say it and so be it.
So we're walking on eggshells there, because as soon as you start going down that road, it raises questions about genetics, ethnicity, race. These are landmines when it comes to political correctness, especially after World War II. You start talking about anything in that vein, and people get very, very nervous. The government included, I think. So it's very delicate matters. But I guess the thing is, for you, this isn't so much an ethnicity or race issue. It's more of a cultural issue.
It's both, Rick. It's both.
Yep.
I have a culture. I have a culture, the Métis culture. It was very represented across. In fact, you know, when Gordon was attacked in the Sudan, I think in the 1800s or whatever, they went and got the Métis boatmen to bring the British Army up the Sudan. So, highly respected. Now you say you're a Métis. Oh, you must be from out west. And what do? Oh, you. And the funding they get is canoes, trips across the Great Lakes, right? They don't talk about our culture. In Ontario, when they studied, they had to put in their curriculum Aboriginal culture. Oh, we'll study Inuit, Indians, and Métis all as one, right? Oh, by the way, Métis have a stash. Okay, you know, like, give me a break, right? They don't teach our history because they stole the lands of the Aboriginal people, okay? And so there has been multi-generational attempts to erode what an Aboriginal person is in Canada. They still don't want to recognize, even though in the Manitoba Act, Johnny MacDonald was supposed to deal with the Eastern Métis. They still do not want to deal with the Eastern Métis. The Métis Nation of Ontario is a political lobbyist group that swears allegiance to the Métis National Council. Now they're in big fights and everything, but when they had the Powley case about the moose, the new guy at the head of the Métis Nation at that time, Balcour, he said right in the court, well, we find some Aboriginal people, put them together, make a community, and that's the new Métis Nation of Ontario. Well, when you sign the application, I think they changed it. When you sign the original, you give up your Aboriginal rights to the corporation, and you can't be a member of any other organization or not-for-profit organization or Aboriginal community, which is against the not-for-profit rules. You can't discriminate from people from joining. So when you got a not-for-profit, anyone can join them, right? Like I could join this the Center for the Blind, or the Center for this, or the Center for that, right? Even though I'm not blind. That's the rules. But they violated that. They set up the Métis Nation, and then they got all the funding in Ontario, and their homeland that they swear allegiance to is west of the Dryden border. So how does that work? So that's to put one group against the other, so they're always fighting, right? And that's the way they manage that. But if I said I was, say, for example, I don't want to say this word, but one group, I can go to another country and get an immediate citizenship. I can say this one, if I say have one drop of Maori blood, I can get citizenship in New Zealand if they accept me, right? But in Canada, if I say I'm Métis, well, we don't recognize you. You're not Métis. So you see, we're the only race, because as Champlain said, we're a race. We're the only race in Canada that can't self-identify unless we become a member of a Métis not-for-profit corporation that swears allegiance to the surrendered Métis under the Manitoba Act, right? So yeah, we have a long way to go.
So you know, I played the clip of you earlier saying that the racial purity thing is sort of it's not really true. It's not a reality. But here we are talking about what essentially, I think, what percentage of blood this way or that way is in someone's body to determine if they're legitimately Métis. How do we define that, or how do we deal with that issue?
What's the difference between a Métis and a First Nations individual? I'll give you an example. In the 1800s, there were no women in the Haudenosaunee groups at Montreal, the Mohawks. There's no women left in the tribe. So what did they do? They went down to Massachusetts and down there and they raided the towns and stole all the women and children from the Swiss and the Dutch community. This is historic. You can research it, right? They brought them all back up to Quebec there in Montreal because they needed women to procreate. Well, when the men it took them about 10 years or something for the men down there to get enough gumption to come get their women, the women didn't want to go back. So when you go to some of these communities on Cornwall, the Akwesasne or the Ganasatagi, Ganawaki, you'll see a lot of blue-eyed, blonde people, right? And a lot of them are intermarried, cousins marrying cousins, just like my family, right? Because there was no people to marry in those days, right? So what's the difference genetically from them and say myself, right? There is no racial distinction other than the A, B, C, D, and X on the mitochondrial DNA. But when you look at the DNA on Anishinaabe people in Eastern Canada, well, the X on the mitochondrial DNA is going all the way across to the Hopi. They have X and they come from Europe. They don't come across the Bering Strait. There's no X in Siberia, anywhere in there. How did they get the X? They came with the Solutrean. That's one of the reasons in discussion, like I said earlier, that I said we're Solutrean, right? They have Aboriginal people down in Florida, the swamp bodies in the peat bog. The DNA for them comes from Scotland. So or England, like how did they get to Florida like 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago? Then you got if you go and look at the genetic stuff all the time down in South America, they're now saying that most of the Aborigine Amazons got their DNA from Polynesia and Australia, right? But they're now Aboriginals directly from there. And then they look at the Paracas skulls, and they're finding the Paracas skulls were redhead. They've got Scottish DNA. You got to really research to find this stuff. And in my case, my B bloodline, they've just proven a report from down by the Himalayas. 60,000-year-old Neanderthal is B blood type. That's mine, right? Now they're saying North American Aboriginals have more Denisovan and Neanderthal genetics than anywhere else on the world, other than some of the Java people in Papua New Guinea and Australians. The Denisovin is heavy down in that, but we're all related, right? So what is racial purity? There's no such thing. Race was defined for a reason under the papal bulls of the 1500s. So if you don't become a new Christian, like they had old Christian, new Christian, if you don't become a new Christian on the papal bulls in the 1500s, you can have slavery. And that's why they had slavery in South America. People don't know their history. There is no such thing as race. Race is just a word for rights for slavery. You know?
So if there is no such thing as race, then how does race play into what you were just talking about? You said that it's both, it's race and culture, but if race isn't a thing, which I think is actually the opposite of racial supremacy ideology, or even a fascistic ethno ideology, it's the opposite of that. It's very tolerant and inclusive. So how does race play into the definition of what Métis ultimately should be?
It's culture.
Culture.
It's culture. You can have a racial component because there's some people that can prove that they have basically 100% Aboriginal genetics from before a contact, right?
But so ultimately, anybody could then say that racially, I could be, that we're all interrelated, so it's not an issue. But then in terms of culture.
$13 of ease. We all got the same genetics, right? Some of us got more Neanderthal, some of us have more Denisovin, some have the hidden ancestral one too, but it's culture. Like, what is an Englishman? Right? Oh, I'm English. Yeah. What's an Irishman? Well, now they prove the Irish are actually Egyptians. They all, 90% of Britain have the same DNA as Tutankhamun. So what are they? Well, Tutankhamun wasn't Egyptian. He was.
So so obviously you can see why the federal government gets confused, maybe even scared when it comes to extending rights to different Métis groups, because it becomes difficult to determine whether someone is Métis or not. But I mean, we're talking now kind of pushing race aside, and it's being defined in terms of culture or adoption even. You know, and from a legal perspective, I can understand the adoption process. If I, as a parent, wanted to adopt a child, maybe someone with Asian background, it would then become part of my family legally, and we wouldn't look anything the same, right?
That's the Indian Act.
So
the Indian Act says that you can adopt a non-Aboriginal person, they get a status card, right?
Right.
Now they've changed the Indian Act over the last few years since I was with Indian Affairs, that a full adult can adopt a full white or whatever race adult, and they get a status card. Mm-hmm. So these rules that they've created, which they change all the time to their benefit, right, have no justification. But you can join a new culture and become part of that culture and extend that culture to the future for the 7 generations. The way the government is trying to take over Aboriginal lands over a long time, like the Chinese go 300 years or something in their philosophy of expansion, right? It's not just the 3 years and then we forget what we're doing, or the 5 years for your economic development for your business, right? What they're doing, the government, is over time, it'll be a melting pot like the United States, right? Most tribes in the United States are surrendered under military occupation. You've got federally recognized tribes, you've got state recognized tribes, and you've got other tribes that aren't recognized at all, right? And what's the difference? They're all the same people, right? See this sectionization and segregation. When the Brits came here in 1773, they got all these old maps from the French about who were the Aboriginal communities in Ontario. If you look at those Aboriginal communities, there's only about 3, I think, that they still have the same name. Like the Kilisatron Nipisaprin, which I am, and the Huron are still there. But depending on what the chief's name were, there's lists of all these different tribes, right? And they got rid of them. They set up fake tribes by taking what they used to call the fake Indians in Montreal, which are a whole bunch of Frenchmen and Portuguese and Italian and Spanish that were living with the Aboriginal people, and they shoved them to other communities. Kitikinzibi was not an original community. Wattamohawk was an original community. They only set up in 1880, right? The Algonquins and Powhatan, they're all pieces of different groups that they put in. They're the only ones. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but that's the way it is, right? When the French gave guns and medicines to the Hurons and the ones that didn't want to go become Catholic, right? They brought the Seneca come up from the States to attack them, and they moved them to Laurier, Quebec, right? So people don't know the history of the Aboriginal communities and the effect of colonization on them. So you have a lot of people who are actually Métis that have no knowledge of the fact that they're Métis or their ancestral heritage. I know people that don't know their grandparents' name, right? And they've been here, their family's been here since probably the beginning of New France, and they don't know their ancestors. That's where you talk about culture. What's your culture? What's your family's belief in who you are and where you come from? And how do you integrate that into your daily life? Well, if you don't know anything about Aboriginal culture, and you only know, those games on the computer and everything, right? How do you have a culture? How are you part of a community? How are you part of that Aboriginal philosophy, beliefs? No, you've been assimilated. And Trudeau said that, and René Lévesque said that. And my joke was, if René Lévesque, who's actually a relative of mine, and he actually has Aboriginal ancestry, if he had said that he was a Métis in Quebec instead of the Québécois, he would have won the referendum. But he was told by Trudeau, just keep it little, just say you're a Québécois, right? Paul Martin, he has 2 Aboriginal ancestry. I had his genealogy in my database, right? So he's the prime minister, but they're all following the precepts of the government structure under the crown because they get benefits financially, these people who are in politics, right?
And this all ties into, what's going on today. And you talked about immigration. It seems to me that, well, again, all of this stuff ties together. The dots connect, and the immigration itself, the way this is all being done, I think puts culture for some communities at risk. Is that fair?
Definitely. And maybe to sum up where I stand right now, my grandfather sat me on the knee. He was a Métis boat builder, and my other sign was a voyageur, right? And the Vigée line, voyageurs. I got Mi'kmaq, all these different groups, right? And some adopted in, but became part of the family and everything, right? All part of the culture. My grandfather practiced his culture. He told me the traditions. He was a boat builder. He was a cook. He was a boatman on the rich people's boats at Aurelia, forget the name of the lake, Couchiching. He told me the stories, and I took proud. I grew up learning all the crafts, the native crafts. I don't know if you see me. I still practice them. I practice my traditions in all my affairs, right? I still do it. That's culture. You have to have this culture. You got people in Toronto, say Italians. They're so proud of their heritage, right? If I say I'm Métis, no one wants to listen, and no one, you pretend Indian. I'm not a pretend Indian. I'm not, sorry, I'll correct myself. Under the Daniels case, Métis are now Indians, but not under the Indian Act. So I am an Indian, right? So now I get labeled I'm a pretend Indian because I say I'm an Indian. So I don't say I'm an Indian, I'm a Métis, right? This is how they do this corruption. And so that kind of, because we've been talking for a long time, Rick, this is the problem. And I don't have the solutions other than, in my case, it's really affected me heavily because my wife is First Nation, and it's brought back all the stuff about residential schools and everything, right? This is post-traumatic stress syndrome for myself and her, right? My family gave their lives in the Second World War and even in the First World War, right? to protect this country. And now it's been infiltrated by crazy people. That's basically it. Crazy people.
And by crazy people, I guess you're referring to some people within what is characterized as the freedom movement.
Yeah, but we don't have any psych hospitals anymore, do we?
Mostly they've been bulldozed. Yeah, they're out on the streets.
Yeah, so that says a lot for our country. It used to be the peace country. It used to be really good. Not this is relevant, but they say that's ancient history. I have a glass that was produced at the time they changed the Indian Act in the 60s. This was the official crest of Canada on it from the 1960s. I verified it. It was a souvenir. I can't say that. A souvenir for tourists, right? Mm-hmm. It's a shot glass. 3 ounces, the big chief. 2 ounces, the clan mother. And then at the bottom, the papoose didn't get anything, right? That's in the 60s, in my lifetime, what the attitude towards Aboriginal people were. Until they changed the Indian Act in 61, 66 something, if 5 Aboriginals were seen in a town in Canada together, they were arrested for congregation and their children were stolen. They had to have a pass to leave the reserve. In 1960. That's well within my lifetime, right? This is the racism that is still there. But when I found that glass, that said it all to me. That put me on this path that I'm on, is that the racism is still there. And it's not going away. And this is supposed to be Canada, the wonderful multicultural, but I can't say I'm Aboriginal, because if I do, I get blasted. He's a fake Indian, right? He's a pseudo-commercial entity. That's what the one court case said. I'm under the Meeks decision. A pseudo-commercial entity. How am I a pseudo-commercial entity? I'm a person, right? And if you say I'm a pseudo-commercial entity, that means I'm an artificial person. Oh, I forgot. Artificial people in the Constitution of Canada have rights because of the class of subjects, artificial people. Ships have rights. Harbor commissions and health units have human rights under the Constitution of Canada, but I don't have them because I'm a pseudo-commercial entity. I'm not a real entity. I'm a pseudo-commercial. That means I'm a non-entity. That's Canadian law.
Well, so the talks with the authorities, the RCMP, CSIS, FBI, these discussions are ongoing. It seems that the activities of some of these people have connected you to past activities and maybe even what's going on now, because you say that they're using your identity, even your signature at times without your authorization or approval. This creates a situation where you're being scrutinized by the authorities as well. Very delicate situation. And I guess we should probably wrap up with final thoughts from you and maybe a message to the general public and how people should be trying to protect themselves in the face of all of this.
Well, the old thing, Rick, is buyer beware, right? If you have no protection, you got to educate yourself and you have to be very cognizant. There's so many frauds out there on your phone constantly. You're getting scams, right? This is no different. This is internet. I verily believe internet scams, seduction for the people who don't know any better, who are looking for something because the government's not providing, and they'll get scammed. And this is big. And this one here is international. It's probably the biggest, I'll say the pretend Indian, because it really is. It's not just pretend Indian, it's just pretend something, right? This is the biggest case going. It's not an individual, it's a whole group of them. And they're utilizing these identities that they created for themselves to scam people. And it's obvious. You showed one right there. Self-promotion, that I'm this great and wonderful, the first or the founding member of a council. I've had councils for ASMIN all the way from the beginning, right? I've had my relatives who sat there and we've had meetings and we sat at dinner tables when I was a kid talking about how we're going to do this, talking about Louis Riel and all the issues out west. You know, my family's been in this Aboriginal identity their whole life because they is. It's not that they aren't, they is, right? So it's buyer beware, and we're still peeling the onion on this thing because it's huge, and it may go further because if you look at the Algonquin land claim, they're starting to kick out all kinds of people. I think there was 2,000 recently, 2,000 people put into the Algonquin land claim have been kicked out. When it started, my mother wouldn't go into it because it was too de minimis. But the lady Joan Holmes at that time, nice lady, she took my Nipissing descendancy and allowed all the Nipissing relatives to join the Algonquin claim, and I think they kicked them all out recently. You know, so it's just crazy. It's so complex.
Yeah, and I guess when it comes to buyer beware, it isn't just the direct impact from of engaging with one of these ASMIN entities. It's also sovereign citizens groups or others who might be selling products or courses online, especially legal courses, things of that nature. And Chief Miko, I'll throw it to you for your final thoughts.
Rick, I put in the chat for you. I mentioned earlier, if anyone that is listening to this or it gets to the ears of someone that knows someone that knows someone, again, as Grand Chief is worded, buyer beware. And if you have come across the ASMIN and you bought this membership, please come forth. Let us, take note, write down exactly your experience, make sure that you're covered through this. I do reiterate, don't be trying to stand on that and make it a claim for you, especially in a court hearing. I know Grand Chief mentioned the AIN, the Alliance of Indigenous Nations. There's been looks into that whole situation with any orders that have been issued. They're null and void. They have no standing. If you have one of those orders and you need to have them readdressed, please reach out. And again, Rick, I did put the contact in there for them to reach out to the tribunal that is auditing all of this and ensuring that we get it kind of, one, a head count of the damage, and two, ensure that no one, and we're making that public note for everyone to be ensured that they are aware that there's an investigation, to please not put themselves out there using an order or an ASMIN membership through this, especially until this investigation has cleared, which, case numbers are filed, multiple inter-border investigations as well. So if you're on Turtle Island and you have been a part of this organization over the last 4 years, feel free to reach out. We'll be in touch, making sure that we try to cover everyone and minimize any kind of damage.
And your email is, if that's correct on the screen, admin@internationalindigenostribunal.com.
Yes, that is the tribunal that will be auditing any of the AIN orders and can take in any type of claim of ASMIN membership as well. So everything can be accounted for financially, as well as any fraudulent orders that could be out there subsequently or to our belief would be fraudulent. Okay.
And since you are also in communication with, say, the RCMP or other authorities like that, would it be appropriate for people to approach police or RCMP as well if they have concerns?
Yes, absolutely. It's not for us to say no to them. They need to make sure that they're covering themselves, and the fraud has to be accounted for. Anyone that's gone into court as well and had damage done to their cases through this, please do reach out. I've had at least 6 or 7 call me alone. We don't want you out there floundering, trying to figure out how to get through it. So please reach out. We're here to at least try to sift through all of this and get some right out of the wrong. Okay.
And again, I'll just restate that any of the information provided here is not necessarily an allegation of criminal wrongdoing, and any allegations that may be connected to any potential illegal activity have not yet been proven in court. So I'll just throw that out there for legal purposes. And Chief Wabiska, I will defer to you for a final comment to wrap things up with the program.
Yeah, it's difficult, Rick, and I appreciate that. And you can call me anytime if you want. As I've said before, I'm still recovering from the brain surgery. A lot of issues there. And this has been extremely difficult when I realized that my trust was highly violated. And one of the side effects of the brain surgery, I can't keep my emotions in check. But I feel for everybody who's been affected by this. And it's going to be a journey, and we'll get to the bottom of it. And there's a lot of other stuff that's happening that we can't talk about. But I verily believe that everything that I was relating here is truthful and accurate. But like you say, it has to be gone to the courts. And I haven't mentioned anyone's name, which is appropriate. But anyone who's been affected will know those names. And I appreciate the time today. I know I talk a lot, but that's just me, right? But people have to educate themselves. And they can't just take internet information. You have to really research. Like I know right behind me there, I'm talking a lot again. I got bins and bins of books that I've been collecting for years. And just for a point, you can't take the new books. You got to go back to the old books, because the old times, like 100 years ago, they didn't lie. But the new books, it's all misinterpretation, fake news, whatever. And so you have to be very careful of what information you bring in and make your own assumptions on. You have to well research it. And hopefully, with the world the way it is, there will be peace. And but it's hard to say where anything's going. The two critical lawsuits in Canada were the Powley and the Daniels. Both of the beginnings of those lawsuits passed before it finalized. I keep on making a joke with my friends that hopefully this will be resolved before I pass. It would be a sad state of affairs if this continues for the next generation, right? Anyhow, thanks, guys. I'm really, Chief, I appreciate you coming on. And anytime later, if you want to talk, we can talk, both of you. And that's all I can say. Just everybody, the Creator is watching. And whatever religion you are, as long as you believe in good thoughts and go in a good way, the Creator, whoever the Creator is to you, will bless you. Okay, thanks.
Hello. Chupisala Chaki. Yakoki.
Thank you to both of you.
Thank you.
Maverick News. Fighting for freedom.
You know, someone very profoundly once said many years ago that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on Earth.
The entire world is watching.
Every dictator, every crazy dictator in the world is watching.
The world is watching. On TV, the entire world is watching. On social media,
but the entire world is watching, and yes, they are seeing what we have apparently bravely been willing to say that others are thinking.
Stand for freedom. Literally stand for freedom. Let's get this done. The entire world is watching.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars.
Maverick News. Maverick News. Maverick News.
Let me have more control of my own destiny.
The world is watching.
And with that, we are going to wrap up for the evening. Thank you, everyone, Maverick family, for being here this evening. Thank you to Chief Miko and to Chief Wabiska for sharing the information, their perspective. And I hope what we did tonight has a positive impact all the way around. I will return tomorrow evening, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on the Maverick News Channel, where we have the antivirus programs for your mind. Catch you on the flip side.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.